Welcome in to Check the Mic. Steve Palazzolo Sam Monson live on YouTube, coming at you from the Mike Vrabel studio. Mike Vrabel is part of the Bill Belichick coaching tree studio. My bad. It's not Mike's studio. All brought to you by FanDuel. And we've got a monster show here today, Sam, and a bonus show. Most people know we're not live on a Tuesday, but it is draft week. It's draft grade week. We're halfway through the NFL. Go check the Norths out, the East yesterday. We've gone team by team, division by division. Today, we're going to the Wests, the AFC and NFC West.
The Wests. I like it. Let's go.
We're going to jump right into it.
Yeah.
Because we've got some pre-recorded interviews we got to get to with some draft experts for Thursday's show.
We have to pre-record interviews.
We're going to pre-record those interviews. All right, let's start with the AFC West and the Denver Broncos. Of course, their first-round pick was Jalen Waddle. Traded their first for Jalen Waddle. You could call that the Dexter Lawrence thing. They maybe evaluated the draft class. They say, hey, we'd rather have Jalen Waddle than pick 29 in the first round. Their first pick was at 66 in the third round after some maneuvering. It was Tyler Onyedem, the defensive tackle out of Texas A&M. Fourth round, they go Jonah Coleman, running back out of Washington, and Cage Casey, the tackle/guard out of Boise State. Round 5, Justin Jolly, the tight end out of NC State. And then round 7, Miles Scott, Illinois safety, Dallin Bentley, the tight end from Utah. And Red Murdoch, the outlaw, linebacker out of Buffalo with pick 257.
Was that Mr. Irrelevant? Red Murdoch is Mr. Irrelevant? Am I remembering that correctly?
Was that yes, Mr. Irrelevant.
Dude,
That's
Red
a good one.
Murdoch being Mr. Irrelevant. I mean, there's got to be a story there somewhere.
Oh, man, that's good. What are your thoughts on the Broncos draft? I'm assuming before we get into Rene Bugner's grades, we know that he does a really nice job accumulating some GPAs around the league. This is the type of draft when you don't have a pick until round 3 that most times the grades don't account for that. They don't like that.
Yeah, they don't tend to like that. At a quick glance, they didn't like it. Wait, no, that's a different sheet I'm looking at. Where the hell is this? No, there it is.
Great. Okay, what are your thoughts on the
they didn't
Broncos
hate it.
draft?
I mean, it's tough. Anytime you get a draft where, your first pick comes up at 66, it's always going to be a little bit tough. Now, particularly if you didn't love that first pick that comes up at 66, then you're really up against it. It's the one good thing you can say about the draft is they did draft 7 times, despite only starting in the third round at pick 66, with 6 of those 7 picks coming on day 3. Obviously, Red Murdoch is going to save the draft by himself, the Buffalo linebacker / TV detective. But yeah, you're going to be in a tough spot when basically all of your picks are on day 3.
Can you, Tyler Onyedem? I had him at 121 on my consensus board. He goes at 66. So obviously that was a bit of a surprise. Both Texas A&M defensive tackles actually. Onyedem went at 66. Albert Regis went at 81. I think that was probably 60 to 80 spots, a little bit higher than maybe the consensus expected.
He was 129 on the consensus board by Arif's data.
I know there was a lot of healthy debates about that stuff this weekend, but what Onyedem does bring to the table, he is a playmaker around the line of scrimmage, especially in the run game.
Healthy debates.
Some unhealthy ones, too, with dummies. Onyedem is – I mean, the A&M defensive line was fun to watch, both him and Regis. I mean, they're good, solid players. You're just getting them probably maybe around early compared to what people thought, but – look, the Broncos have a good track record of developing these guys and getting them into the mix. I think I did want them to add some depth on the defensive line. I think this is one of the best things they could do to just try to stay strong on that side of the ball. Onyedem I think he's a solid run defender. When we get into the third round, I say solid a million times. Solid run defender. Doesn't have the anchor like most defensive tackles. Doesn't handle double teams or holding the point. But he's got quick hands. He's good run stop percentage. I told you about that tackle percentage stat yesterday, just the percentage of tackles that a player makes as a percentage of snaps on the field. And Yedem's above the average of, say, solid players at the NFL level, above average players at the NFL level when they're in college. So there's some run game chops to like there. He's just been a below average pass rusher. Part of that was scheme stuff coming out of Iowa State, but even at Texas A&M, not necessarily an impact pass rusher in round 3. But if you're getting maybe an early down run game playmaker, I think that's what they're looking at here with Onyedem. And I know our friend Dane Brugler was a big fan of his.
I was going to say, for what it's worth, Dane Brugler has him ranked significantly higher than the consensus board. He had him at 74 overall. So even with Brugler's board, it's a bit of a reach, but within the margins of, this is kind of where you take a guy like that. Relative to the consensus board, both Dane and the Broncos apparently were wildly higher on him than the average, let's say, of everybody whose board was out there. But you're right. I can't remember. This is almost an identical line that he had about somebody else where he might not have a true distinguishing trait, but he doesn't have any fatal flaw that will be exposed by NFL competition. It's like, there's nothing special about him, but also there's nothing that will cripple him at the NFL level. He's just a body that will chew up some rotational snaps for you.
Dane, I know Dane says that he lists, 2,300 or whatever the number is in the Beast, but there are actual scouting reports on not only, but 500 or 600 players. That's the challenge when you're writing, starting with scouting report 100.
Oh yeah, it's not a criticism. I'm just saying
Oh, I know.
We read out one of those that was very similar.
Yeah.
In one of the previous shows. But that's his version of describing solid, right? There's nothing out of the norm in either direction, right? There's no superstar trait. There's no massive Achilles heel here. There's just a guy who's reasonably solid at everything.
So, look, I think, wanted to bring a little bit more analysis maybe than we did live the other night. I think that's what they're getting on Nyedam. Jonah Coleman was one of my favorite players in this draft. He's the running back out of Washington. Another one of those guys who I think probably had a little bit more hype coming into the year than this past season when he battled through some injuries. Really productive player. All of the if you saw any of the charts floating around the internet with missed tackles forced or yards after contact, he's excellent in that area. Didn't test, but 5'8", 228. He's 23 years old, so there's a couple things working against him. But I had him as the second best running back in this class from a production and draft score perspective. Different type of player than Jadarian Price, and maybe leveled off a little bit at Washington. And I think there's a good value in the fourth round, especially in a running back class that had Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, and then a whole bunch of question marks. I think Coleman's at least the third best option at that position in this draft.
Yeah, 220 pounds at the combine, 222 at his pro day. So at 5'8", Maurice Jones-Drew was 210 pounds at 5'7". So he's got 10 pounds on MJD with only an inch more in height, right? Darren Sproles was, I think, 5'6" and weighed 100 and something. This is an absolute monster of a human being at 5'8".
And I think with Denver, he's going to have an opportunity there. I think R.J. Harvey in the second round last year, and I thought he, did some nice things at points last year, and I think he got a little bit better, Harvey, at not trying to bounce out all the time. But I think Coleman's a good zone runner. He could run gap scheme. I think he's a smooth athlete, despite not having any of the testing. His game athleticism numbers were fine. I think this is a good pick for Denver in the fourth round. I think he's got a chance to really contribute here.
No, this is maybe my favorite pick they made. No, other than Red Murdoch.
Other than Red.
Right.
Across the rest of them, Cage Casey, another guy, there was a slew of developmental fourth-round tackles. I'd say he's, for me, on the higher end of those players that, could kick into guard. You've got to clean up some footwork issues in pass pro. I know you were three-play scouting on Justin Jolly from NC State, but I don't think he's completely useless as a tight end candidate. Dallin Bentley, a tight end out of Utah, has a pretty good production profile. There were a few seventh-round tight ends. I got to do a deep dive on the tight ends.
It's not a draft unless you came out of it with two tight ends.
The seventh-round tight ends had better production profiles than a lot of the second and third-round tight ends, but the second and third-round tight ends were the guys that you trusted more in line and the true Y type of tight ends. It's going to be a really interesting draft nerd storyline over the next couple of years if the Jack Endries, who went in the seventh round, Dallin Bentley, who went in the seventh round, Carson Ryan, who went in the seventh round out of BYU, those guys were more productive receivers and had better production profiles than a lot of the day two tight ends, but they might not have the all-around blocking skill set. So,
which feels like it's been common in recent years where teams that have drafted multiple tight ends, the second guy has ended up as the better tight end. Now, maybe that's just your selection bias. You're remembering the ones that worked out. But, it seems like 1 million tight ends got drafted this year, and almost every team that drafted a tight end seems to have double-dipped on tight ends. I wonder how many of those where the second guy is going to end up being the better player.
As far as Jolly, I think he's got a little bit to the pass game. What were the plays that you saw in the Senior Bowl where you said, man, these are rough?
There were a couple. One was a route running thing. One was, I think, a feel and zone thing. It was a few reps that didn't look great, stacked back to back to back.
Yeah, I think he's got decent speed. Route running wise, every now and again, you'd say, oh, pretty good footwork. Other times it did look, use the word clunky a lot. 96th percentile missed tackles forced after the catch, though. So, Sean Payton gets him into space. Maybe there's something there. And I think he moves pretty well for 260 plus. What did you have his weight handy? I think I'm still pulling from some of the listed weights at what I'm looking at, and I'm off a little bit. But
he was 6'3", 241 to 5.
Oh, okay. I was going to say the 260 didn't make any sense, so that was a bad listed weight that I'm looking at, because he looks more like he's in the 240s. All of his blocking is going to be H-backy, getting the way type of stuff. But again, I think there's some receiving ability for him in round 5. We should touch on Jalen Waddle just for a minute here. It wasn't exactly like, it was kind of in between the Bengals trading for Dexter Lawrence and the Micah Parsons trade, which happened before the season. There's Jolly. Look at that. Look at those routes getting open at the Senior Bowl. With a ton of space, one-on-one. But they decided Jalen Waddle's a better option than pick 29. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. This was one where, I'm a little bit, I'm not sure I'd put it quite in the same bucket as the Dexter Lawrence one, but if you wanted to bring in an impact receiver and you knew you were picking somewhere towards the bottom of the first round, you weren't going to get somebody like Jalen Waddle with that kind of pick, obviously. He's a very good player, and he's versatile. He's shown in Miami he can be the high volume, underneath, lateral type of receiver, but also bring a lot more downfield stuff to the table as well. You add that to what Denver already had in their receiving core, and suddenly that starts to look like a very threatening, imposing, deep receiver group for Bo Nix to throw to.
And for the second straight year, just to wrap up the Broncos discussion here, second straight year, I think we're looking at a Denver team that did not have any egregious holes on the roster. We certainly didn't say, if they had picked 29, this is the position they absolutely have to have. And I think that's part of the allure of getting Waddle, adding a playmaker where, I think they probably would have wanted to add a receiver, but you get the more established player who's got a skill set. It's not even that it's a different skill set, his speed and the verticality. It's just a better, more productive player than what they've had in Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims and the other draft picks that they've used there. The O-line's in good shape. The D-line, as I said, probably could have used some depth. Just to make sure that they're in good shape in the coming years. I think Onyedem at least helps there. Last year, their first-round pick was Jahdae Barron, who wasn't a need pick and didn't have a great rookie season, but I still believe in him long-term. I think Denver's in pretty good shape here, and they just continue to add depth pieces here in the draft.
For anyone that hasn't seen these shows before, we look at we use Renee Bugner's composite grades, where he's collected 24 different draft grades together, created a sort of GPA for both the graders, how harsh are those graders effectively, but also the teams. Collectively across 24 grades, how well did each team do? So Denver's ranks 26th in these grades. Obviously, the outlier East German judge score is Chad Reuter with the A-, who writes for the NFL. And then the negative side, the outlier would be the New York Post, who gave Denver a D+. But overall, they rank 26. Pretty tight in the sort of middle third of teams, so they wouldn't need much to jump above a few teams. But generally, a bunch of Bs, bunch of Cs.
All right, let's go to the Kansas City Chiefs. They made the first big trade up in this draft, moving from 9 to 6 to get Mansour Delane, the cornerback out of LSU. And then they proceeded to have 3 more picks on the defensive side of the ball before they picked offense. They go, I kept saying pick 29 for Denver, by the way. I meant pick 30, right? Is that what they had? 30. Messed me up. 29 was the Chiefs via the Rams. That was Peter Woods, the defensive tackle out of Clemson. They go R. Mason Thomas, the edge rusher out of Oklahoma, with pick 40. They don't pick again until round 4. They go Jadon Kennedy, the cornerback / safety out of Oregon. Emmett Johnson, the running back out of Nebraska, in round 5. Cyrus Allen, the wide receiver out of Cincinnati, with their second 5th rounder. And then Garrett Nussmeier, the LSU quarterback, in round 7. What are your thoughts on the Chiefs?
So the trade to get up from 9 to 6, they had to give up only 148 and 74 in order to do that. So that's
3 and a 5.
Yeah. So they give up their 3, they give up a 5 to get up from 3 spots to get to 6 to get Mansour Delane.
And they may, I mean, look, when you trade up, there's always risk. I think for Cleveland, that was a no-brainer because I think we had an idea who their player was and they got him. For Kansas City, there was a chance that they could have sat and still had Mansour Delane.
Sure.
I think it was not a rich haul relative to charts or anything like that, but it was a pretty significant investment to make sure that they get CB1 in this class.
But also, particularly, again, when you put it in the context of you traded away Trent McDuffie to start this whole thing with, to get you an extra first-round pick, you're then using not just a first-round pick, the higher of your two. You're using not just a first-round pick to replace Trent McDuffie, but you're then adding to that value you're adding to the financial commitment, the overall collateral that you're giving up by trading up to get to 6. So you're not just you're spending a first-round pick to replace Trent McDuffie. Now you're also spending a third-round pick and a fifth-round pick to replace Trent McDuffie. Okay, you're doing it a lot cheaper in terms of salary cap, and that's one of the trade-offs there. But you're now giving up a fair amount of resources to replace the guy that you already had on the roster and you only opted out of keeping on the roster because of the contract that he was going to be due. So that's part of how you have to view this, I think. But in terms of just the player...
Before you get into Delane, I want you to describe the player in just 1 second. But I got to shout out Tim Wallman in the chat, who just dropped a super chat for you. He said, just here to eat crow for saying I couldn't take Sam seriously when he had the Chiefs taking a corner in the top 10. So shout out from Tim. And just before you break down Delane, who I know you like and both of us like, one of the debates throughout this whole thing with these 2 first-rounders and an obvious need at corner with their 2 starters leaving, would the Chiefs lean on their previous experience developing day 3 players, the L'Jarius Sneeds of the world? Would they do that again? Or would they draft a first-round corner, which they did with Trent McDuffie, and they decided, hey, we're going to go first-round corner here with Mansour Delane?
Yeah, so it sort of shows you that they drafted Trent McDuffie in the first round. They know the power of a good corner, and they know that they're not working some magic wand to be able to just pluck any of those guys from day 3 and replace them and, work wonders. Like, they knew you can draft a guy at the top of the draft if he's that good. I think Delane is that good. I'm a little bit surprised that over the entire process in this draft of all drafts where we've been saying there are no blue chip players in this draft, I think Delane had an argument to be one, and nobody ever really called him one. His tape at LSU is sick. Like, he was absolute shutdown. He gave up a pass rating into his coverage of like 31 or something. No touchdowns, no penalties. One of the most patient corners I can remember scouting for years. I mean, the only other guy I can think of that is in the same kind of category is Patrick Surtain, who, again, very similar, just sits there, waits for a receiver to do whatever he wants to do, release, make his move at the stem, and then just goes with him. The only difference between the two is Delane's got shorter arms, not quite as big, but I think they're very similar in terms of the way they play the game. And similarly, Surtain just didn't get beat in college. Now, maybe he did it for longer and had a larger body of work. And if you were nitpicking, that's where you would say, what's keeping Delane from being a true blue chip player? It will be maybe only 1 year of like elite level production. But that 1 year said this is a blue chip elite shutdown corner.
Yeah, I think watching Delane at Virginia Tech and then watching him at LSU, I don't want to say night and day because it wasn't like he was awful at Virginia Tech, but he was from week 1 outstanding at LSU. From week 1 against Clemson, and he looked like the best corner in the nation, and I think he was all throughout last year. So then he goes to the combine, and I think speed was ever – I mean, he goes to his pro day. I don't think speed was ever a question for Delane, but he runs a 4.38. I thought that was what really just solidified him in the first round. I thought he could have run anywhere in the 4.4s. You would have been happy. If he ran in the 4.5s, you would have said, well, he's still too good for to care about a 4.5 40, but he runs 4.38. It's just another box to tick for him in the process. Yeah. Made a lot of plays on the ball. He's got pretty distinct splits in one-on-one coverage versus in zone, and we know how much Kansas City likes to play their press man, play man coverage on the back end. So again, I think it's a good fit. His footwork was so impressive to me. The more I watched him all throughout last season with LSU, his change of direction, everything he did athletically. And I think as McCoy's injury popped up, Avion Terrell's star faded just a little bit. I think Delane became the clear first-round top corner with D'Angelo Pons maybe being better second-round value, of course. But I think Delane was the clear cornerback one in this class, and Kansas City didn't leave anything to chance and said, we have to come out of here with an impact corner because that's what we need defensively.
And maybe, they might have actually been a little bit like Miami. So we had sort of, in a lot of mock drafts, Miami was kind of in this world where they were locked in on maybe if Delane's there, they would grab him. If not, maybe they could take Jermod McCoy or Dallas too. Like there were a few teams in that kind of range that we thought might be in the cornerback market. And if Delane had gone, they could pivot to Jermod McCoy. Or even if, McCoy might be cornerback one for some people. But when it became clear that the knee injury was basically removing Jermod McCoy from the conversation on day one, if not day two as well, then it's like Delane is the number one corner and nobody else is even in the ballpark. Like whether it's Avion Terrell, Chris Johnson, D'Angelo Pons, whoever you're seeing as the next guy, evidently the NFL sort of saw that as a massive teardrop. So if maybe the Chiefs were actually that team that were locked in on corner the whole way, and the second McCoy's injury became a thing to basically take him out of the running, they were just like, it's, delayed no matter what, the meme, right? They just had that written on a sheet somewhere in the war room.
So I want to talk about like the overall, hey, the Chiefs went defense with their first 4 picks. We'll talk about that at the end. But we'll go player by player here, at least with the top players. Peter Woods at pick 29. So their second first rounder. They go with the defensive tackle. We talked about Woods quite a bit in the pre-draft process, the idea that coming into the season, he was thought of as a top 5 to top 10 pick. He and the rest of Clemson disappointed this season. Maybe his best year was as a true freshman back in 2023. But I wrote down coordination as one of his strengths because you see his ability to tie his footwork to his hands, and you see some of the ability to get after the quarterback. I thought he's a disruptive run defender. But like his defensive line mate, TJ Parker, you were just left wanting more this year. But then it got to the point where I thought if you get Peter Woods in the back end of the first or maybe even the early second, you get great value there. And I think this ends up being a really nice pick for the Chiefs.
Yeah, I think his tape is pretty solid as well. I didn't really sort of realize until I got into it how small he is. You look at so he didn't do the workouts really, so there's nothing to work from.
Did some.
At his pro day?
Well, yeah, so he did. Remember, he was the guy who just ran a 10.
Right.
But, he's got short arms.
Yeah, I hope there's tape of that. Just the 10.
Just the 10.
Stop it.
He's got 31-plus-inch arms. This was part of.
Well, this is the thing. So the height, all the measurables are like, so arm length is 5th percentile, wingspan is 12th percentile, hand size is 6th percentile, even height and weight are 35th and 30th percentile. This is a really small defensive tackle.
Yeah.
I'm kind of stunned that at any point he played at like 320, allegedly.
Yeah, so that was part of this, right? A guy whose production leveled off a little bit in year 3 and then didn't test well or have good length, size, or anything special athletically other than the 10. He ran a 10.
And it was good.
And then stopped.
Right.
And it was really good. 93rd percentile, 10-yard split at 1.67. I think it's the first guy that I've got in my database that's going to have just a 10 and no 20 or 40.
I kind of feel like had he run drills, he would have tested well. Like I don't quite understand why he didn't.
But the cone, I got him as a 7.7 cone.
Oh, that's true. I see that too. Yeah.
Not great.
Okay.
30, and then a good shuttle 4.54 was fine.
Yeah.
But the jumps weren't that great. So the athleticism is all over the place. But like I said on tape, I think you see the coordination and athleticism and balance and ability to do some damage. He's just we talk about ticking boxes along the way. He didn't, right? He didn't have the great final season. He didn't have the great workout. He underwhelmed a little bit.
Didn't tick any box.
Right, but then it got into the body of work and the early breakout in his career and the 3-year sample is actually really good in a first-round profile, and it becomes pretty good value here for the Chiefs at 29.
I definitely think at 29 this is really good value. He's a very confusing prospect. Like it's all over the place. Everything, inconsistency I think is the word across the board, not just in literally everything. Like he was inconsistent in weight. Apparently he went between like 320 and somewhere under 300 pounds. Like measuring at the combine, sub 300, I don't think did him any favors either. the tape is inconsistent, like the levels of play, left, right, and center. The fact that he never even aligned in the same place consistently, like they had him out in the edge at 320 pounds at Clemson, and he was doing pretty well there. Like, this is the weird thing. You would think at that size, given his frame, played as a true edge rusher, he would do nothing. But actually, he was more than good enough playing on the edge a year ago at the bigger weight. So, like, nothing about his profile is consistent. But if you just look at the ways he wins, there's a bit of everything in there. Like, he can hold the point against double teams despite being relatively undersized. He's got good technique in that area. He's got good ability to shed blocks. That's his kind of superpower, I think. The quickness is there sometimes. Like, it's a little bit of everything. And when you consider Caleb Banks got drafted to 11 picks earlier on what he could do. Now, admittedly, you're talking a much more impressive, rare physical frame for Caleb Banks and general athleticism skill set. But the theory's the same, right? You're taking both those guys on the basis of what they could be, not necessarily what their baseline has been.
So for Woods, look, I've got him overall in my draft scores an 81, which is good.
Yeah.
Which is a good one. Now, I had a question in the chat, and I'll just answer this once again. I went back and I looked at, because I look at a player's career. He's a career 81, but his final season was below that, right? And so I run the model off of just a final season, a final 2 seasons, and their whole career. The players who have a better career than a final season, meaning they disappointed in their final year, they actually perform better at the NFL level than players who went the other way and had a final season peak, who had a 1 year wonder, the 1 year wonder that I talk about. So in this class, the 1 year wonder types are guys like Skylar Bell from Connecticut or Zion Young, where a big chunk of their production came at the very end. Those are guys where the data actually says more buyer beware, and players like the Peter Woods and TJ Parkers of the world, who maybe peaked early, actually become a good buy low. So we'll see how it all plays out. I get the reasons why he fell to 29, and I get that I would rather see better testing numbers, and I would rather have seen better final year production. But I think it's a good move for Kansas City here at 29.
Yeah, I think my bottom line for him was, I get all of the concerns, but I think people took it too far. Like, the people are like, I don't see any kind of first-round profile there. I think there was a lot of positives there. And if you get to 29, I'm all for taking Peter Woods.
And then they come back defense again. And this whole time we were thinking, and I want to address it, they didn't touch offensive line. They didn't go receiver. They didn't go for the Kelsey replacement. They didn't do a lot of the stuff that you talk about pre-draft with Kansas City the last couple of years. Like, these have been multi-year conversations for them. They go back to the defensive line with Mason Thomas, the edge rusher out of Oklahoma. So with 3 top 40 picks, they get the top cornerback, they get a defensive tackle who was thought to go maybe top 10 a year ago, and then Mason Thomas, the sawed-off pass rusher who can affect the quarterback. A little juice off the edge here.
Juice off the edge.
For the Chiefs.
Yeah.
Just drop as many cliches as you can on Mason here.
Edge. Yeah. Well, I mean, look, we've got to, again, remember, I just saw, there's like sports graphics are getting funnier and funnier, where it's just like picture the dude and then just a random string of words that are meaningless without context. They're oftentimes. Yeah. But some of them are getting truly ridiculous. And Mason Thomas had one that was just him at the press conference, with the hat on or whatever. And then it just said, it doesn't stand for anything, referring to the R.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that's going to you need the caption with that one. Otherwise, we don't know what we're talking about here.
So
I think he's a good player. Again, when you get into these second-round guys, something's missing, right, relative to the first-round players. You're not talking about a complete all-around skill set with no holes. But to me, when you're looking for these guys, I would like to bet on a special trait versus get a guy who's just solid at everything. I haven't researched that, but my feeling from just the anecdotal thinking back over the previous draft classes is the guys that are just solid at everything have a pretty terrible hit rate. So give me the guy that's got some kind of trait. And as you said, he brings legitimate juice off the edge. Like, he's got burst, he's got speed, he's got genuine pass rush ability. And even if he is a bit undersized and maybe he's not going to be, a top-tier run defender, I'll bet on that versus the guy who's just solid.
Yeah, I think he helps their pass rush. I think he brings a different body type. The body type buffet is changing in Kansas City.
We need that in a T-shirt.
BTB.
Body type
buffet. So, yeah, look, I think Chiefs fans, we talked about throughout the draft, we said the Chiefs struggled on third down. They couldn't get off the field in several big games. They've added 2 pass rushers with Mason Thomas and Peter Woods, and maybe the best lockdown one-on-one cornerback in the draft. Pretty significant additions here for Kansas City. Beyond that, Kennedy brings some flexibility, nickel, corner, safety ability. Emmett Johnson, I thought was going to go higher than the 5th round. He was another, I don't want to say one-year wonder, but more of a breakout season last year. Ran well for Nebraska. He catches the ball pretty well out of the backfield. This backfield is going to look completely different next year with Kenneth Walker, with Emmett Johnson, maybe taking some snaps there. And then Cyrus Allen was one of Mike Renner's big sleepers in this draft.
Yeah.
And his other sleeper was Borkircher, who went in the 2nd round, the tight end out of A&M.
And actually, they also signed as an undrafted free agent Jeff Caldwell.
The other Cincinnati
receiver. They got both
receiver.
the Cincinnati receivers.
Jeff Caldwell's the guy, and this is why I hate just in isolation, like, oh, he's got Calvin Johnson's workout. He's like nothing compared to him
What was
as
the
a
name?
player, but he's got the size and speed, which is absurd.
But you know what he's going to be. Who was the former Clemson receiver that for like 8 straight years was the
Martavis Bryant?
No. The Chiefs breakout preseason guy.
Oh,
every year.
right. Yeah.
What's his name?
Why am I losing it now?
I know. Same. Jeff Caldwell's the new that guy.
He's the new that guy.
What the hell is his?
As soon as he catches one end zone fade
in the preseason
from Mahomes
right.
in training camp, we're going to be
training camp and then preseason. What the hell was that guy's
right.
name?
He was supposed to be an early rounder, and then he went undrafted out of Clemson.
Right.
I cannot.
Why have both of us forgotten the man's
predicted
name?
100. More names are falling out of my brain.
Ross. Not John Ross. The other Ross. Justin Ross. Justin Ross. God dang. People are screaming at the thing. Yes, Justin Ross. Thank you, chat.
Did we
Jake
get it?
in particular.
Justin Ross.
Jeff Caldwell is going to be the new Justin Ross. Every single preseason, every single training camp, it's like, look at these plays. He's going to be a breakout
Caldwell's
star.
the next guy. So, yeah, interesting draft for the Chiefs. Obviously, defense heavy with their first 4 picks, particularly the 3 in the top 40. What do you think this set? I mean, so Brett Veach I think he hinted at people bought into the O-line hype or whatever, which is interesting because, like, I try to like hear what teams are saying because it's informative.
You see what Nate Tice said?
No.
Nate Tice.
Oh, he said that they could have the best offensive line.
Yeah. He said, he basically, was quote tweeting somebody saying the same kind of thing. Chiefs didn't go offensive line. He's like, yeah, I never really understood why people said they would. This could be I can't remember whether they said top 5 or said could be the best offensive line in the NFL next year. I mean, it could be on the basis that a lot of things could happen. I don't see any particular reason to think it will be. Creed Humphrey is, I think, the best center in the NFL. Trey Smith is a very good guard. The other 3 would have to, the collective average of the other 3 would have to be significantly better than it's been so far for this to be the best offensive line in the NFL.
So Josh Simmons got a ton of hype as like a plug-and-play left tackle. We can't spend a million hours on this, but I think Simmons was maybe slightly overrated compared to the perception. I think he'll be fine.
Right.
Run game-wise, I got some questions. I think Kingsley fit in fine at left guard. Mm-hmm. And then right tackle Jalen Moore, again, is fine. I mean, in our criteria usually have few question marks. I really don't think they have a ton of question marks on the offensive line.
That's the thing. Like, you have a very high floor if you just don't have a weak spot, but still.
I don't like the depth. Like, I don't like Wanye Morris as my swing tackle or even Esapole. I just don't like the third tackle. The only reason, like, I didn't even know that there was hype around the tackle thing or that they were putting false flags out there necessarily. I just looked at it and said, I love Fano, and you get tackles in the first round, and Jalen Moore is probably not the long-term option at right tackle.
I mean, he's only got a year left, even if he was. You have to re-up him.
Right, and so having a tackle for, because you're not just drafting for this year, that would have made sense to me. But they didn't attack the offensive line, and they didn't go pass catcher. So there's no next Travis Kelce in this deep tight end class. There's no Rashee Rice security if you're not going to lock him up long term.
I mean, forget.
So they're banking on, their current roster on offense, and maybe a UDFA wide receiver steals some snaps, but they're banking on that current roster to be good enough
and Cyrus
offensively.
Allen. Yeah, and Cyrus Allen, the 5th round.
And Cyrus Allen. In the 5th round.
Not just they didn't draft the Travis Kelce replacement, they didn't draft a tight end in the tight end draft. The draft where everybody was drafting multiple tight ends, if possible.
Well,
Kansas City didn't take any.
They're not going to become a wide tight end, run the ball type of team, I don't think.
Evidently.
And again, I'm not criticizing either way. I'm just reacting to the strategy that clearly was defense heavy with their first 4 picks and saying there either weren't offensive players that we liked or we didn't see it as a big of a need that we had to, sneak a receiver in there, sneak an offensive tackle or whatever it may be.
Yeah. This being said, this was one of everybody's favorite drafts. They were 7th overall in the composite grading, with the worst grade a B-. Nobody gave them anything worse than a B-.
Interesting. I mean, I like a lot of the players that they got, and I think they absolutely improved their defense.
Like, literally nobody disliked this draft. I mean, even other, like the Jets, you had Yahoo giving it a C-. Like, somebody hated something. Nobody disliked the Kansas City draft.
All right, let's go to Las Vegas Raiders. Of course, they kicked off the entire draft with Fernando Mendoza, the QB out of Indiana. They come back at pick 38 in round 2. Tredaon Stukes, the safety/corner out of Arizona. 3rd round, Kieron Crawford, the edge rusher out of Auburn. They go to Texas A&M. Former tackle, center conversion, Trey Zune with pick 91. And then they kick off round 4. They trade up to go get Jermod McCoy. We'll talk about him in a second. The Tennessee corner who fell, first-round ability, fell because of the knee injury. Mike Washington, Arkansas running backs, their second, fourth-rounder. They round out the draft with Dalton Johnson, another safety out of Arizona, Hezekiah Massis, the cornerback out of Cal, Malik Benson, the wide receiver out of Oregon, and Brandon Cleveland, NC State defensive tackle.
My favorite draft grades are the ones where the guy just randomly hates a player that's supposed to go exactly where he goes and goes there, and it's like F. So it's like there's somebody somewhere has the Raiders with a terrible draft grade because they just don't like Mendoza as a quarterback. Oh. They're like, this is a terrible draft. Look at him. They drafted this bust, number 1 overall. It's like, yeah, but everyone knew they were doing that and thought they should. It's a little harsh to downgrade them for it.
And then you get into the philosophical question of, do you give them credit for
making
the
expected
layup pick?
Not even a layup, just like
are you
completing the process.
The players that came in, the players relative to expectation. There's a whole different bunch of ways.
They completed the CAPTCHA. Are you a robot? Yeah. Yes or no? No, I am not a robot. Hey, well done.
All right, so let's do 60 seconds on Mendoza because some Raiders fan is watching us for the first time. Let's do our 60 seconds on Mendoza, and then break down the rest of this class.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think he was the clear number 1 quarterback in this draft, even though I know there's a fringe minority that would have Ty Simpson as QB1. I think Mendoza was the clear number 1 quarterback in the draft. I think the only question, therefore, becomes, do you draft him or do you trade out of number 1, try and get a draft haul and come back next year or whatever? I don't know what offers were on the table. If any, they locked in fairly early in the process on we're just drafting Mendoza. I think that's absolutely a perfectly legitimate thing to do. I think he was a good, not great quarterback prospect. He's got size, he's got a good arm, he's athletic enough. And then his sort of calling card is the guy's a maniac in terms of attitude, right? It's all LinkedIn, it's all laser focus, it's all lunatic, like give me a book of headshots of my new teammates before I even meet them. Like, he knows every single player on the Raiders roster already, right? By name, by sight, even though he's never met these people. And number 1, the NFL is going to love that, right? But I think there's probably some power to that. That's the kind of crazy that probably is a good thing for you as an NFL quarterback.
Yeah, that's the type of stuff that people want to...
It's also, by the way, it's the type of stuff Kirk Cousins would do.
Yeah.
And I think Cousins gets much maligned because of, playoff success and the fact that his agent is maybe more talented than he is. But Cousins has turned being a 4th-round pick with marginal talent into being a very good NFL quarterback.
Shout out Mike McCartney.
Over his career, right? And I think the reason for that success is stuff like this, right? Cousins is also that kind of maniac.
There was a somewhat heated for Charles Davis and Daniel Jeremiah.
I saw the caption. I didn't see what they did. What was the argument?
CD doesn't get heated. He got lively, though. He got little spark from CD and Daniel Jeremiah.
Two of the nicest people in the
oh
business,
my gosh. And we get friends of the show.
CD in particular, I might be the nicest human I've ever met. But
yes,
those two
we've
are
heard
very
CD
nice people.
try to explain character concerns, and it's like the nicest possible way of saying this dude is awful.
Right.
And so a couple nice dudes, friends of the show, CD and DJ. And the debate was Charles Davis saying, I don't care, Fernando Mendoza needs to play.
Okay.
And Daniel Jeremiah saying, I don't think he will. I think Kirk Cousins is playing football. I think he's the one that's going to start. They were debating how many starts, and they were going through the whole thing. And look, as a data guy, I don't think there's enough data either way. I stand on my general vague answer every year, when the rookie quarterback is ready to play, he should play. Define ready if you're the Raiders, and whenever he's ready, he plays, whether that's week 1, week 10, or next year. And you have to have a definition of what ready is, whether it's playbook mastery and not swimming and whatever that may be. And then my second rule with the quarterback thing, which is untestable because there's outliers everywhere and just not enough data, is...
And never the A-B analysis.
Yeah, there's never the A-B. We care about 2027. We always care about next year. We care about 2027 more than 26. The goal should not be who gives us the coach speak is who gives us the best chance to win this week. The reality for the Las Vegas Raiders is who gives us, or what's the best way we could be a winning team in 2027. And you do everything you can to prepare Fernando Mendoza to be ready to go for 2027. So that's my answer to the debate. CD was basically saying, don't play this game.
What was the debate? The debate was should they or will they?
I think it was a little bit of both. I think CD was basically saying, let's not play this game. Kirk Cousins is the starter. He's earned it, and he's saying that's fake. I've heard this a million times. And then in week 4, they put him in. And in week 5, he's basically saying, don't even do that song and dance. Put him in. And then I think DJ was basically saying, let him sit. Like let Cousins start. You signed Cousins to start. Let him start. And that sitting might be the best thing for Mendoza. And he also buys into maybe that the Raiders did sign Kirk Cousins to start and to ease Mendoza in. So we'll see what ends up happening.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. I
think he starts. I think he starts right away and Cousins is the backup. That would be my prediction.
My guess would be Cousins starts for a month. He's the classic, we'll slow play this and then you get a month to play before he comes in type of thing. That would be how I imagine it going. I think they've signed Cousins to give them the runway to slow play him. I think also he probably could use it. Like that idea that he's coming from a very RPO-heavy type of offense. It's a fairly big jump from schematically from what he's been doing to what he's going to be doing, admittedly stepping into a quarterback-friendly system. But I don't think it's any harm to have him sit and slow play that for a bit. I think Cousins is the type of quarterback and assigned the type of contract that lets you do that. And then even if my thing is always lasts a month. No matter what your plan is, it's always 4 games, and then the guy comes in.
I think that's what CD's whole point was. Like, don't even do that song and dance. Just give it to the kid right away. Give him the experience and let's go.
But to me, there's no downside to that. I mean, I don't really care. Like, I don't think the fact that people spend the first month going, when's Mendoza coming? Who cares? I don't think that makes a difference to anything.
I think he'll play. I think the LinkedIn guy is going to he's going to have the playbook mastered. He'll be ready to go. Jared Goff, when he sat for 3/4 of the season, he still looked like he was kind of swimming in year 1. It was a bad system. It was a bad situation, but I don't think we're going to see that from Mendoza. But rest of the draft class here. Stukes was a fascinating prospect who a couple insiders had mocked late first to the Chiefs, both to the Chiefs here. Maybe it was Josh Norris and someone, maybe it was Schrags. I think maybe Peter Schrager did it. But Stukes ends up going to the AFC West. He was a corner. He plays nickel, but he's got safety-like skills, right? He ran a 4.33, and you see that speed on the field. I like referencing the 40 when it shows up on the field, but he's got just really good ball skills, tracking, safety-like skills at the catch point. Reminds me a little bit of Darnell Savage when he came out. Like, he ran fast, and he also accelerated through the catch point to make plays. I know Savage has had an up-and-down career, but
Savage is a good one. He reminded me a little bit of if you gave Jarius Byrd 4.3 speed. Like, takes really good angles, can make plays on the ball. Jarius Byrd, I think, was limited by the fact that he wasn't actually that fast. And once teams made him play closer to the line of scrimmage, it was a problem. I think he kind of needed the extra room to make the plays. But if you gave Jarius Byrd, like if you say, all right, you're a 4.3 guy now, what would it look like? It feels like it would look a lot like Trayden Stukes.
So, yeah, I think there's a lot to like. I think he's got some positional versatility. Whether he plays nickel, outside corner, or true safety, he's very athletic. It shows up on the field.
Safety, right?
They listed him as a safety. I see safety-like skills.
Yeah.
And I see safety-like range and ball skills, and I'm interested to see how that all.
Yeah, I would want to play him as a safety, and I think that's what they're going to do.
Kieran Crawford out of Auburn, he goes in the 3rd round. We kept mentioning him as really popping when you're trying to watch.
Yeah.
Keldrick Falk on the other side, like who's number 24? Who's this guy with the burst and juice off the edge? He's just another guy that has the 1 year of production, but you could see it as a pass rusher, his ability to get after the quarterback. Our friend John Ledyard really did like Crawford, had him above Falk, which I get, depending on what you value. I wouldn't take Crawford over Falk, but, as a 3rd round pass rush type. He's coming off of a really good season and trending in the right direction.
I'm starting to really admire that, by the way, as a trait, like the ability to be that far away from the groupthink just by going to watch it. It's like everyone knows this guy is the prospect, and you're watching the same tape and be like, you know what, the other guy's a better player. I like that.
So I'll go through my numbers really quick.
Not necessarily I like endorsing it as being correct, but I like having the guts to be, because it's very difficult to actually avoid the groupthink of like, this guy, you're being told this guy's the better prospect. You're like, yeah, but if I'm watching the tape, the other guy keeps making all the plays.
Let me get the actual numbers here, because I had him, I've got my PVM production number for college and everything. The college PVM number for Crawford was elite last year. He was an elite college player, and it was a lot higher than Falk's.
Right.
So it wasn't just, this eye test is pop, this guy's popping right now. Last year, my production numbers have Crawford as a better, more productive player than Falk.
Right.
Now, the problem there is the entire career matters, the career trajectory and projection and everything. Falk's a better prospect in my numbers and everything. But it's not like Ledyard just like goes rogue. I mean,
I'm not saying
if you just watched last year's tape,
right,
Crawford was a better player.
But
now,
still,
if you watch
most
Falk
people
and
would
his skill set and his ability in the run game, you'd say, okay, he might be a better prospect. But Falk as a pure pass rusher, and you're getting that in the third, I think there's something there.
But even then, I think most people would watch the tape but know that one guy is being talked up as the prospect, and they'd find a way to let that, sway them into saying this guy's better than this guy, even though my eyes are telling me the opposite is true. So I just have admiration for anyone that's willing to go the other way.
We got bend, burst, and playmaking pop for Crawford. I like that in the third round. Trey Zune's going to be a center conversion.
People loved him.
Yeah, this is the great center debate of 2026. It's going to be blocking tight ends in the center debate. There's like 7 centers really that maybe some were true centers, some were conversion. We'll see how it all plays out, but the Raiders got a guy in there with some positional versatility. They don't need a starting center with Tyler Linderbaum in there, but Zune maybe
might need another guard,
backs up in multiple spots here.
Yeah, they might need another guard though. So maybe he comes in and contends to start, because remember we said that before, right? Any center often starts at guard for the first year or two. Now Tyler Linderbaum's there, so I don't know if there's ever a path to play center for him. Maybe he's just a backup across the board somewhere. But if you actually love the guy, think he's really good, and want to give him a path to the field, maybe guard is the quickest way there.
And then we got to talk Jamad McCoy. They traded up to get him beginning of the fourth. He was a top 15 prospect. He was CB1 for some people.
Yeah.
But at worst, probably cornerback 2. But it's not just that he missed all of last season with the ACL.
It's not at all that.
It's not at all that. I mean, that was a question coming in, but he just ran in the 4.3s. Right. He showed that he's healthy. There's a long-term knee injury where he'll likely need another surgery, a surgery that would cause him to miss a season and could have an effect. I've heard it described as like when we used to hear the phrase microfracture surgery in the early 2000s. And that was like this crushed a player's career. It is like the new microfracture, which isn't really a thing anymore.
It might actually be the same. It might actually be the same kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like it's so. Yeah.
But it could really quick. So it could knock out one of his first 4 years and affect his ability going forward. His overall athleticism,
or one or the other. Yeah. That's the thing. So there's some kind of cartilage damage to his knee, which has already had an operation on it to insert a bone plug, which is supposed to help stabilize, repair that cartilage. The talk is that either that needs to be redone, in which case that surgery is a year out of the game, or that the fact that he's got this cartilage problem already basically means the knee's already shot, and that will be the end of his career at some point, the limiting factor in his career. Also, if that surgery doesn't go well, that will be the end of his career. So there's effectively 3 different ways that this could be a problem. Number one, if he has to have the surgery, it's a year out of the game, so that's 25% of his rookie contract you're not getting him on the field for. Number two, if that surgery doesn't go well, his career is basically over. That's a risk. And then number three, even if the surgery goes well, or you put it off until the end, until after his contract or whatever, it might be the knee injury that stops him being a second contract player or a third contract player. And it's just the limiting factor of his career. So 3 separate ways that injury is a concern. The first pick of the 4th round is the first round in the NFL draft where guarantees in contracts in terms of money changes, and if he has to miss a year, it's less expensive for NFL teams. So you sort of see the ruthless business decision making of NFL teams here, where the chances are once his knee was seen as this big of a problem, McCoy was always going to go with the first pick of the fourth round because that's where the contract changes and it becomes a cheaper risk for them. Ultimately, I feel like this is a steal, even not knowing really what the story is with the knee.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about a guy that has first-round talent. Like, he was 14, I think, on the consensus board. So people just evaluating him say, this is a mid-first-round pick who runs a 4.3, who several people had as cornerback 1 in the draft, said was better than Mansour Delane, right? Even if you're not there, like the fact that there are enough people saying that, it's significant. So obviously the knee injury and the concerns, that's going to cause him to fall down the draft. But at some point, like we're in the third round, forget the fourth round, we're in the third round looking at guys being like, I mean, this guy's missing a whole bunch. Like, you know, there are guys that you're already factoring in. Either this guy's a backup or he's like a situational player or he's extremely unlikely to become a useful starter down the line. If you get 75% of a rookie contract out of McCoy and he's as good as you thought he was, and even if he has to miss 25% with a knee injury, that's still better than the players you're taking in the third round who you don't think have a real shot of starting, who are missing a key part of their game, you know, all these things. So in the first pick of the fourth round, I think it's an absolute steal, just as it's just as the gamble, right? Even if everything you hear about the knee is exactly true, it's worth taking the gamble. And on a personal level, I really hope the dude, you know, overcomes this, bucks the trend, like beats the odds, because from his perspective, this was a guy who probably thought at some point relatively recently that he was going to go in the first round, maybe high in the first round, and has to sit there through 3 days of the draft because of a knee injury that he couldn't control. Like the dude at some point had a knee injury. Doctors have now run the rule over and said, man, you're damaged goods. Dr. David Chow used the term damaged goods. You're damaged goods, and now the guy has to sit there for 3 days waiting for his name to get called before he eventually gets a chance. So I really hope he has a career now off the back of this.
Yeah, I'm with you there, and I think it's absolutely worth the risk for the Raiders. The high-end potential there is absolutely worth it in the fourth round. Just to wrap up there, I know you loved Hezekiah Massas and his name, Senior Bowl guy, added some cornerback depth. Mike Washington just has an interesting profile, probably one of the worst production profiles for a running back for me, but one of the best workout profiles. Ran in the 4.3s, and he's another one. He's similar to Kieron Crawford, where his best year was last year, and by far. So the Raiders are banking on, even Stukes, really. I mean, they're banking on Stukes, Crawford, and guys like Mike Washington, who the last thing we saw in college, if you just saw that, it's like, man, this is really good. But they were kind of breakout players just in their final season, and we'll see if they can continue that development. But Washington was an interesting player where he's in the backfield with Taylor Green, and they've got great speed and versatility there. And Washington had a really nice final season at Arkansas.
And we can't ignore the fact that as an undrafted free agent, they signed the Tokyo Toe, Kensei Matsuzawa, from the kicker from Hawaii. Remember, we watched him on the
We did. When we were at Circa watching Hawaii Stanford.
Yeah.
Week 0. The Week 0 kickoff.
The Tokyo Toe.
Legend of a kicker here. Where'd the grades have him? We got to start picking up the pace here, getting to the Chargers.
The grades had them pretty high. They were the second overall team. Only the Browns had a better overall composite score, and it was pretty close. Not everybody, most people had them with an A of some description. The lowest grade they had was a B- from Roto World. That's only one B-, a bunch of Bs, B+, and As.
Interesting. All right. I think the getting Mendoza at the top, I mean, if you're just looking at the haul, they came away with what they needed there. See how some of these developmental or these one-year breakout players end up developing here for the Raiders. All right, let's wrap up the AFC West with the Los Angeles Chargers. They go at pick 22, Akeem Mesidor, the edge rusher out of Miami. They come back in round 2 with Jake Slaughter, who feels like more of a true center / professor, who also maybe dabbles at guard, but they go Slaughter in round 2.
Every picture of his is ridiculous.
4th round, Brennan Thompson, Mike McDaniel favorite here, 4.2 speed receiver with their first of 3 4th-rounders. They also come back with developmental tackle Travis Burke, Genesis out of Memphis, Genesis Smith, safety out of Arizona, Nick Barrett, defensive tackle out of South Carolina in round 5, and their 2 6th-rounders are guards, Logan Taylor out of BC and then Alex Harkey, who played right tackle.
Glad they finally got around to it.
And could kick into guard. I would say, I'd say Harkey out of the 2, I know he went after Taylor, I think has some potential to play. He's mean. He can move people in the run game. Got to get better in pass pro, and his stumpy arms are forcing the move inside.
What the hell is with the arm length?
Just short arm people everywhere here. What were your thoughts on the Chargers, Hall?
Okay, so the first thing you got to factor in is, the first round, right? A lot of people had them going guard in the first round. It seemed like by far the most glaring need of their roster. And, the fact that the season went the way it went last year with Justin Herbert, MVP caliber, Justin Herbert, getting buried every single snap. It's like this team desperately needs a guard. There's guards in the draft. Surely they're going to take one, right? And whether it was hoping a Venga Ioane fell to them or whether it was drafting one of these tackle conversions and moving him into guard, surely they would do this, right? Now, as the draft unfolded, you had potential tackle guard converts like Caden Proctor getting drafted at 12. Venga Ioane, the top guard, gets taken at 14. Other potential tackle guard converts are gone. So you could sort of, and even, so you sort of look at it and say, well, who would they have taken if they were looking to just add a guard in the first round? Would they have reached as far as the Texans did for a guy like Kalen Rutledge? Would they have drafted Emmanuel Pregnon, who people had getting into the first round, but ends up sliding to the third, right?
Yep.
So you can sort of look and say, well, maybe the board just didn't fall their way, and this is always the risk. So instead, they go Akeem Mesidor and go for an edge rush need, and that's also a need for them. So that, I think, is okay. That's fine, right? You can look at it and say, look, this is the risk with entering the draft with a glaring need, is sometimes the board just doesn't fall your way, and either you have to force the pick or you go in a different direction. So I'm fine with Mesidor. I actually really like Mesidor as a player. The more I watched of his tape, the more I loved it. The dude is relentless. He's one of the most high motor players you're ever going to find. He's versatile, can play inside and outside. He can defend the run and rush the passer. If he was 22 years old, I think this guy would be a cast iron top 10 pick. Instead, he's going to be 25 during the season, and that comes with its own questions. But I think this guy's a great player and a great pick. Then the question becomes, okay, now what are you going to do about that guard need, which is still a glaring need? And that's where this draft seems to get questionable, seems to at least be interesting, because Jake Slaughter, as you mentioned, seems a pure center. Later on, the next offensive line they drafted, Travis Burke, is a tackle. And then it wasn't really until late in the draft where you get a couple of actual guards. So now you're like, well, did you even answer the guard? Like, did guard get upgraded at all in this draft? Because if it didn't, that feels like a real problem.
They're attacking it in the aggregate between...
or the second wave of free agency, which begins now, right?
Yeah.
These guys that no longer count against the comp pick formula who are available on the open market, like they should be busting down the door of...
Kevin Zeitler.
Right, and being like, I know you don't want to move west of the Mississippi, but we can like build a hunting spot for you. We do whatever you need. Just please come to L.A.
Brady Christensen's still out there. There's a few names out there that could plug and play, and it doesn't affect the comp pick formula, which the Chargers are really, really protective of. And then, like, can Slaughter move out there? He felt like more of a true center just because that's pretty much all he's done at Florida.
Right.
And so that'll be interesting to see what they think of him and what they do. They just signed Tyler Biadasz to a multi-year deal in free agency. So if Slaughter is going to be the center of the future, that might not be for 2 seasons. But if he was a good player. I think he was one of the couple centers that I really liked that is plug and play. Ravens GM Eric DeCosta said as much. He was one of the two centers that he thought could come in and play for the Ravens were off the board by the time they picked in the 3rd. So he's referencing Slaughter as one of those players.
Yep. Mohal says, congrats on 83,000 subscribers. And that I said I will go shirtless for 100,000 subscribers when we get there. And unlike Mike McDaniel, I will not renege on that. I will sit here in this chair shirtless when we hit 100,000 subscribers.
Can't wait.
I'll do it.
Hopefully,
now, Mike McDaniel said he would go shirtless if they drafted...
before the season. Before the season.
McDaniel said he would go shirtless if they drafted Brennan Thompson, and then they did, and he didn't. I've seen no evidence that Mike McDaniel went shirtless. He just seemed happy.
He seemed very happy at Brennan Thompson coming in, and it is a perfect fit. So you've got the speed of Brennan Thompson, and That's why I was a little surprised when Xavier Thomas and his 4.28 speed from LSU went ahead of Brendan Thompson, because Thomas had been more of a gimmick player, whereas Brendan Thompson had been a really productive SEC player who's putting SEC corners in a blender.
Right.
Even just, running like a, 10-yard curl route or whatever it may have been.
He's got some of the best yards per route run numbers of the draft class against both man and zone.
Corners had to play way off just to worry, just to respect his speed. And I think McDaniel's going to use that. So you drop him into this offense that has Ladd McConkey, Quentin Johnston, Trey Harris, Keandre Lambert-Smith. However the receiving group breaks down, I think you had Thompson there as your wide receiver 4 deep threat. He also has the 1 punt return for a touchdown on 1 attempt. So I love that pick in the 4th. By the way, we're in danger of having Chargers hype here for year 15. As the rest of the league,
I'm not hyping them until they find guards.
I know Charlie Kolar made $8 million in free agency, but I think as a year 5 tight end, established wide tight ends, the rest of the league is maybe reaching for some young tight ends. I know it's more expensive to get Kolar, but they've got one of the best blocking tight ends in the NFL to go with last year's Aronde Gadsden, and now adding Brendan Thompson. I really like the way this team is shaping up. If they could just fill the 2 guard spots before the start of the season.
Don't reach by 150 picks in the draft. Just go give Charlie Kolar $8 million.
Yeah, it's not like for like, but I love Charlie Kolar. I'm just a Charlie Kolar fan.
Look, so somebody in the chat there is like, the Chargers had no backup center behind Biadasz. Slaughter was the right pick. I mean, yeah, but they don't have no starting guards right now. Like, the alternative between Slaughter and starter Emmanuel Pregnon, to me, is a no-brainer. You take the guard. Now, maybe they just hated Pregnon as a player, right? They passed on him multiple times.
Right.
So it's possible, and you can't, I think, realistically slam a team for just deciding that a player is garbage or whatever, and just, he's not our guy. We're not taking him. But to me, it's not a great draft, because for the first 4 rounds or whatever, they ignored what I think is their biggest possible need. And as much as I don't think you should draft for need, at some point you have to.
Here's what's really interesting about their 2 first picks, and I know they got 2 guards late.
Yeah.
The first 4 rounds, they got a true center in Jake Slaughter and a true tackle in Travis Burke. I mean, he's 6'9", and he is not going to play guard.
Right.
At 6'9", he is a true developmental tackle, which is good value there in the 4th. He's coming off a really nice season at Memphis, and if he ends up being your swing tackle for the next couple of years behind Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater, I think that's a good pick. But you don't really carry a backup center. You carry a backup who could play center and guard. You carry a backup tackle who can also play guard. It's just interesting that their first 2 picks, Slaughter and Burke, don't necessarily project to guard. Maybe Slaughter can do it, but and then maybe one of those late rounders can jump in and play, but we'll see. You usually don't grab starting guards in round 6. They're usually developmental and depth players like Logan Taylor and Alex Harkey.
And Pregnon's not the best scheme fit for in the world for them, with Mike McDaniel's offense coming in. I still think he could do it. And to be honest, the need is so acute that I think at some point you just have to suck it up and make the pick that isn't ideal.
James Daniels out there, he's got a connection if he's healthy. So look, this is why I don't like saying, well, this team didn't fill the needs. I don't like that generally, because there's other ways to pick up players and other plans and there's post-draft. I don't like that as a judge. As I said yesterday, the draft is your place to get cheap, good football players, regardless of position. I think the Chargers were solid overall with this draft. And I think Mesidor, I think need and value matched up there, because Khalil Mack, he's going year to year with the Chargers. Tui Peloto is about to get paid if they want to keep him around. Mesidor gives you a cheaper option there, but you're rolling 3 deep at edge rusher right now. I also think Mesidor's skill set, his ability to win in multiple gaps, I think he's excellent at tracking down quarterbacks, peeling off the rush. I think in this division with Patrick Mahomes and Bo Nix, I think that's going to be extremely valuable. I really like a lot of what the Chargers did here.
Yeah.
We'll just see. Let's just wait and see. And
the players,
if there's a post-draft plan at guard here.
Mike Clay put out a chart the other day that was the sort of current unrestricted free agent cheat sheet that are still out there. There's probably 6 names, I think, at guard that you would want on the team starting, and I think the Chargers need to come away with at least one of them, if not 2 of them, in the next couple of weeks. Joe Bitonio, Kevin Zeitler, Greg Van Roten, James Daniels, Brady Christensen. That's maybe where you would stop the list in terms of players you
honestly,
want.
Daniels has had some injury issues, but he's got a history with McDaniel in Miami. If you just brought him and Christensen in, I think you're
Greg Van Roten's been solid enough.
And
you're
Zeitler.
I mean,
in a much better spot. And I assume that's the plan here for the Chargers.
Yeah.
Anything else on this draft before we get to the
they ranked 24th in the composite grading. Not a loved draft overall, perhaps for similar reasons than I didn't love it. The Sporting News had them with the high water mark. They had them with an A-, even more generous than the NFL. The worst grade was from Yahoo, and this was from Nate Tice, who gave them a D.
I will say I didn't love a lot of their I don't criticize teams for not filling their needs. I think that's a dumb way of evaluating the draft. I just didn't love a lot of their day 3 picks besides Brennan Thompson. Burke's fine. Harkey's pretty good. I personally didn't love some of their day 3s. And I think Jake Slaughter is going to be a big pivot point for a lot of people. Some people had him as center 1. Some people didn't care for him. Getting him at pick 63, I think, is going to weigh heavily on people's grades and evaluations here.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
or if you care about, Akeem Mesidor being.
Yeah, that part I don't care about. I do think there's some, you have to at least be aware of what the alternatives are when it comes to filling glaring needs in your roster. Like, I think at some point needs need to factor into what you're doing in the draft if you've put yourself in that position. Now, ideally, you don't put yourself in that position, but teams do, and if they then don't address it, I do think that should affect a draft score.
Yeah, but if they sign James Daniels or Brady Christensen or Greg Van Roten this week, I don't think that means that not drafting Emmanuel Pregnon in the second was a bad move.
No, but if they don't, it does.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. All right, quick break before we get to the NFC West. All right, right now, new FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That's right, turn $5 into $250 in bonus bets just for getting started. And when every possession matters in the playoffs, FanDuel makes it easy to get closer to the action. From player props on your favorite stars to all the tools you need to back them up. FanDuel puts player research right at your fingertips so you can check stats, trends, matchups all in one place and make your picks with confidence. It's everything you need all in one app, so don't miss your shot. Head to FanDuel.com/33rd to get started. FanDuel, play your game. 21 plus in select states. For Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino, or 18 plus in D.C., Kentucky, or Wyoming. First online real money wager only. $5 first deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets which expire 7 days after receipt. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or 1-800-MY-RESET. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut. Visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org. Call 800-327-5050 in Massachusetts. Call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York, or call 1-877-770-7867 in Louisiana. Quick break to talk about our friends over at Root Insurance. Root Insurance believes that good drivers deserve better rates, so they've created a new kind of car insurance that rewards good drivers in an easy-to-use app. Traditional car insurance companies focus on demographics like age, zip code, occupation, and credit score to price your coverage, but when Root offers a rate, your behavior behind the wheel gets more weight than any other single factor. They don't use occupation or education level to negatively affect your rate. While you drive, Root gathers and analyzes data from your smartphone sensors, and after a few weeks, you'll get a car insurance quote based primarily on your driving. Save up to 44% off your initial Root quote after you take the test drive. If you need a tow truck, jump start, or lock your keys in the car, Root will cover the help you need to get back on the road when you opt into roadside assistance. The Root app makes it easy to edit your coverage, update your policy, or file a claim in just 3 minutes. You get started today at Root.com. All right, we're on to the NFC West, starting with the Arizona Cardinals here, Sam. They went with Jeremiah Love at pick number 3, the Notre Dame running back. A bit of a surprise unless you were paying attention late in the draft process. Nobody had them with Love until pretty much a week before the draft. They come back with guard Chase Basantis out of Texas A&M at pick 34, early in the second round. First pick of round 3, they go Carson Beck, QB from Miami. So there's your potential QB answer, at least competition. Carson Beck in the third. They come back in the fourth round with Caleb Proctor, the defensive tackle out of southeastern Louisiana. Your favorite Texas Tech receiver, Reggie Virgil, in round 5.
Let's go, Reggie.
Carson Sherrar, the linebacker out of Iowa, and Jaden Williams, tackle out of Ole Miss, in round 7. Your thoughts on Arizona's draft?
This is one of the most interesting drafts out there, I think. The Jeremiah Love thing is fascinating because, like you said, it was a really late push in terms of reporting that this was going to be a thing. It was only a couple of days before the draft. everyone had kind of locked him into Tennessee at 4, and the debate was, well, should you take him at 4? And then if he gets past 4, do the Giants take him? Does he get as far as Washington? Blah, blah, blah. That was the sort of Jeremiah Love discussion. And then really late on, it was like the reports were, or at least the ones I heard, they were sort of debating, Arvell Reese, David Bailey, the second, whoever gets past the Jets. And then somebody within the building in Arizona really liked Jeremiah Love. And apparently whoever that person was sufficiently high up that wasn't going away, right? The rest of the decision-making tree wasn't able to simply dismiss that as a nice idea, Frank. How about you take a seat in the corner and shut up again? But that was sort of a thing. And then evidently that person had enough sway that ends up being the pick as well. What I find most fascinating about that pick is how close I can get to justifying it and endorsing it as an idea. Usually, I would think a running back at 3 overall is crazy. And I'm not quite on board with it, but I'm way closer than I thought I would be. My biggest problem with it was you look at their starting 5 offensive linemen, which, by the way, they then made some additions to. But Paris Johnson, Isaac Seumalo, Hjalde Froholt, and then, 2 from 3 on the right side of that line, Matt Pryor, whoever you want to put in there, either on the right guard and right tackle.
Elijah Wilkinson probably playing right tackle there.
Can you be sure that starting 5 is good enough that Jeremiah Love can come in and look amazing, right? And I don't think the answer to that question can be yes, but I think you may be able to answer yes on every other aspect of the running back this high decision-making tree, right? What are you leaving on the table? The surplus value thing, the just general contract idea at number 3 overall. And then, of course, you're not necessarily just drafting for 1 year. Now, running backs, you're doing that more than other positions because their careers are shorter. They can hit the ground running right away, and maybe the longer you last it, or the longer you leave it, the worse it gets. But, if they come back next year and they draft an offensive tackle and suddenly 4/5 of that offensive line's in really good shape, and maybe Jeremiah Love had to suffer through one Ashton Genty type of season, right? But after that, suddenly he looks like Saquon Barkley. I'm pretty close to saying it's a good pick.
Obligated to highlight that when you make the pick at 3 overall, he becomes, Jeremiah Love, the number 7 paid running back in APY and number 1 in guaranteed money. So that's the surplus value argument that you're bringing. And so when you're thinking of it as a multi-year move, how much does that hamstring you going forward? I know James Conner's coming off an injury, but Arizona had done a really nice job of getting value out of James Conner for a few years now, getting this basically second contract running back, guy that was an afterthought because of injuries and various things throughout his career, and gotten great value out of him. You bring in Tyler Algier, who's been a productive running back, as your backup this offseason. So on paper, they were in a good, decent spot at running back, and they still go with Jeremiah Love. Now, as a player, here's what I'd say on the positive side. As a player, we know he's got the home run hitting ability. We know he could take it to the house, 4.36 speed, shows up on the field, runs away from the defense. All the physical traits are there. He can catch the ball out of the backfield. He's a smooth pass catcher. When people say, oh, he's a playmaker, that's their way of saying, yeah, we'll move him around. We could do different things, but it doesn't change the fact that you'll pay him more relative to the league. I think it's high for a running back.
Yeah.
But then the fun part is when you plug him into this offense that now has, Jacoby Brissett, Gardner Minshew, and Carson Beck maybe all in the mix at quarterback, right, depending on if Brissett holds out. Marvin Harrison Jr. on the outside, Michael Wilson on the outside, Trey McBride, maybe the best tight end in the league at tight end, and now Jeremiah Love. And we said the same thing about Gibbs in Detroit. We said, okay, we got to go through all the economics of the running back deal, and honestly, even if Gibbs is good and you get to the end of the contract and you got to pay him in this other massive amount, there are some financial implications and dependency implications of drafting a running back. But when Detroit drafted Gibbs and you looked around and it's like, good luck covering Jameson Williams and Amon-Ra and then eventually Sam Laporta when they added him at tight end, and the power of David Montgomery as a 1-2 punch, and the offensive line was great in Detroit. It's like, all right, this starts to make sense. The line's not in the same place with Arizona. I think they're fine.
Yeah.
Up front, they're fine.
That's the biggest concern with them.
But there is this element of good luck covering all these all these playmakers.
Yeah.
Now, I still think they're a year away from figuring out the QB unless Carson Beck is fantastic. But you got to go through all the positives and negatives. I don't think I would do it with Love, but now that he's there, I think it does make Arizona a lot more difficult for defenses to handle.
And it's not a normal draft, right? We've been saying this from start to finish. There is not the normal list of blue chip players at the top of this draft. Jeremiah Love was a lot of people's number one player in the draft, right? The only blue chip player for some, right? This is the only completely clean blue chip, no question mark player in this entire draft. Some people had Caleb Downs there, but unlike Jeremiah Love, Caleb Downs didn't have the special physical traits, right? Jeremiah Love ticked that box as well. So you can make the case that he was the one blue chip player in this entire draft, at which point, again, it's another reason that you can talk yourself into running back where normally you wouldn't, because normally you would find some other blue chip player at some other position, and basically every other position is seen as more valuable than the running back. So it is this one rare, unique year where I do get drafting a running back at 3. I think I still wouldn't have done it. I would have found a way to go in a different direction, but I'm surprisingly close to being able to endorse it. Basantis in the second round, another guy who was talked about as sneaking into the first, didn't quite get there, but being drafted at the top of the second makes some sense. And again, that, you know, when you're reading out those lists of names, right, on the offensive line, if Basantis steps in and upgrades one of your spots at guard, if he upgrades right guard or whatever, immediately that starts to help the Jeremiah Love argument, because maybe now your offensive line is 4/5 solid, and that gets you closer to being able to talk your way into Jeremiah Love could be really good. Caleb Proctor, I thought, was an absolute steal where they got him. You know, we had Renner
Someone
on.
was asking if he had a crazy fall. I wouldn't say it was like to 104. I don't know that that's a crazy fall necessarily.
I don't know that it was a fall at all, was it? Where he was more a riser who was sort of being taught. Yeah, it was 123 in the consensus board. So he's the classic guy where everybody talks about him as a sleeper so much he starts to become, like Renner was questioning whether we could even call him a sleeper, right? Everyone's on him now. Everybody's talking this guy up. Like he's, you know,
he ran a 4.79 40.
Yeah,
1.68 10. Really good workout, athleticism overall. Yeah.
But it's like if, you know, ultimately everybody just identifying him as a sleeper but not actually raising him anywhere on the board doesn't, like, he just went more or less where he was expected to, but everybody still loves him as a prospect.
Just to go back to Basantis, really. So I think Proctor was fine at that point. They needed some sort of athleticism on the D-line. I think that's a help. Basantis in the second, my data did not love him at all. Film-wise, I thought he's got all the tools. I think he moves well. He's got power. It's like,
why does the data hate him if the film says he's good?
Well, because the film that I was watching was mostly last year, right? And the data takes care of.
But other people loved him as well, like
the multiple year deal. Like he was okay until last year. He was below average from just like overall run blocking profile, and really below average from a pass blocking profile. So it's not that I liked the film, but I get it, right? I think he's got the movement skills, the power, and everything to succeed. To me, it's all just a hands and technique issue, which feels fixable. So that's what I get about Basantis. But because he lost a lot, the data doesn't like him.
Right.
So that's the difference there. So like I get it, but I generally lean on somebody with a better production profile than a Basantis. But I wouldn't be surprised if he figured it out, because he's just getting around dudes a little bit too much instead of, you know, staying inside and moving. When he gets it reminds me a little bit of Guyton. Like when he gets it right, it's really, really good. He's got to get a little bit better pad level wise when he's on the move, and, you know, get his hands better.
Carson Beck falls into the category of most of these mid-round quarterbacks, which is, I can't disagree with the process or the idea that, hey, we have currently our quarterback battle is holding out Jacoby Brissett versus an injured Gardner Minshew. So, yes, absolutely, add a quarterback at some point. He's just not the one I would have added, but I can only criticize that so much.
We've matured a lot through the years, where if we hated a quarterback, we'd say awful move, terrible. But I think we've learned a lot that you don't really know. But for Beck, the boxes that he ticks, winning a lot of football games across 2 different programs, playing a lot of ball, at one point was expected to go in the first round. I think even when that was the case, it was almost like by default. But even when that was the case, I don't think he did anything special arm-wise, anticipation-wise. He'll run the offense fine. He'll get to his check down. He can throw the ball down the field. He just has these implosion spurts.
Everything.
It's spurts. It started in 2024 when he was at Georgia. He'll just throw the ball to the defense in chunks. Last year against Louisville, multiple interceptions. What I was impressed with, though, was down the stretch. Miami did kind of put they reeled him back in a little bit, which isn't always great for a guy that you're expecting to go to the NFL and carry a franchise, but I thought he did a better job of taking care of the ball and getting what was needed down the stretch in Miami's run, to the college football playoff final, and he made some big plays in those games. I think everything's just okay. Accuracy, arm, mobility, everything's just okay for Beck, but he's played a lot of football, and that's fine for a third-round pick.
Yeah.
Played a lot of
Played a lot of football.
Played a lot of
ball. A lot of starts.
But it's still a data point that might be interesting, might be valuable. And you liked Reggie Virgil from Texas Tech.
Yeah, big, tall, long, skinny wide receiver. He's got really quick feet. Didn't run particularly fast, ran in the 4.5s, I think, which is probably why he's in the 5th round. But he made plays at the Senior Bowl, I think, pretty consistently. I think he could be a vertical threat for a team, even though he only ran a 4.5. And I think he could do a few more things in those underneath routes as well with that quick footwork.
All right, what did the people think about Arizona?
The composite grading had Arizona.
I'm going to guess low because people probably downgraded the running back deal.
It had them at pick number 28th in the list. Now, this is one of the widest spreads of anybody. Obviously, Chad Reuter gave them an A. Other people had B pluses, though. We got a B plus from Bleacher Report. We got another B plus from Prisco. Prisco liked it.
It's going to depend on what you believe about the running back and the value.
Yeah.
Basantis, if you thought he was a first rounder, getting him in the 2nd, and what you thought about Carson Beck. And I could see a wide range of opinions on just those 3 picks alone.
I honestly think the majority of it is going to be the Jeremiah Love thing. But anyway, so Prisco's got him with a B plus. Right next to Prisco is a D minus, and then 3 more Ds at the end of this thing. So big spread on the Arizona Cardinals between loving the draft and hating it.
All right, man, let's talk Los Angeles Rams. They end up,
speaking of loving or hating it,
with the surprise of the draft. How does Hayden Winks even get? He's not even added to the GPA. He kicked him out of class.
Well, yeah, presumably because you can't run the calculation anymore.
Just 5 picks for the Rams. They kick it off with the surprise of the draft. Ty Simpson, the quarterback out of Alabama, at pick 13. They come back in round 2 with another tight end added to the roster, Max Clare from Ohio State. Keegan Trost is the pick at number 93, tackle/guard out of Missouri. C.J. Daniels, wide receiver out of Miami, is their 6th round pick. And then Tim Keenan, Alabama defensive tackle, in round 7. A fascinating draft from the Rams for multiple reasons here, Sam. But let's start with the Simpson thing. Obviously, we were live when it happened. What were your initial thoughts? How surprised were you that Simpson was the guy at pick 13?
I was surprised, but then the more you sort of think about it, we began this whole process thinking that Ty Simpson to the Rams made a ton of sense. And also that Ty Simpson to the Rams at 13 made a lot of sense, given that they were in this rare position, really right at the start of the process. It's remember, the Rams almost won the Super Bowl this year effectively, and yet were in possession of the 13th overall draft pick because of the Falcons last year going to trade for James Pierce Jr. That's a rare gift for that team. And how do you spend a gift like that? Do you go, chasing the player that you're rarely going to get an opportunity for? And one way, I think a lot of people speculated early, that might give you a chance to get a quarterback to be Matthew Stafford's successor that you're not going to get otherwise, right? This is the problem with having quarterbacks that are good reaching the end of their careers. You want the succession plan, but you're never going to have a high draft pick to get them until they leave, right? Until you get the one crappy season when you have to start a Curtis Painter or whatever, right? You're never going to get that. So this was seen at the time as a way the Rams could get the next guy. And then it cooled off when everybody sort of decided, Ty Simpson's not actually that good. Maybe he's going to be a second-round player, blah, blah, blah. And then later on, it was only the Arizona Cardinals even care about Ty Simpson. The Arizona Cardinals, Dan Orlovsky, and that's about it, right? Those are your Ty Simpson stands. And then they just sort of shocked everybody by doing what everyone said they were going to do to begin the whole process anyway. So on the one hand, it makes total sense. On the other hand, it was also a shock because everyone had gone away from that throughout the process.
So you're right. Like Ty Simpson was already a bit of a hot button issue as an evaluation, and then you add in the fact that the Rams made this move. There's so many layers to this, Sam, because every time we have defended the Rams' strategy to basically give up on first-round picks and the F them picks discussion, you'd counterbalance it by saying, well, look at all the volume they drafted in. Look at all the volume. Well, they only drafted 5 times.
That's the interesting part of this.
That's the other compounding factor here. In a year where the criticism of the Rams is they made it to the NFC Championship, I would argue they've got the best roster in the NFL right now if we're playing football this week, and they're so close. They made all these offseason moves, and they didn't help their team for this year. That's the criticism. And then your evaluation of the Ty Simpson move is going to be twofold. How much do you care about future-proofing the quarterback position, and how much do you like Ty Simpson? And my opinion on this is very much like the Michael Penix thing. I've, in my old age, decided I'm not going to criticize teams for overcommitting and trying to future-proof and over-investing at the quarterback position. And it's not even my old age. Like I mentioned this on the show when I used to do mock drafts years ago for the Steelers, and they had Big Ben, and the last couple of years of Big Ben, and it's like, let's make one last run. I would always mock a quarterback to them and say, let's think long-term here. And some fans hated it, and some fans got it. I mean, honestly, like Steelers fans, if you're watching, chime in. Would you have rathered that the Steelers, when given the opportunity to draft a QB, Lamar Jackson, whoever, would you have done that during the Big Ben era, or would you say, no, old man's got to get one last run here? And it's just like, what's your preference is what it comes down to. Like if you're a Rams fan, you might be saying, man, Mekhi Lemon would have been awesome in this offense, with Puka Nacua on the field, if Puka Nacua has off-field issues, with Devontae Adams for one more year and then replacing Devontae Adams, man, we left Mekhi Lemon on the field. And that's a fair assessment. But I think the Rams decided we're gonna do both. We're going to think about this year and we're going to think about the future all in one. And if you do love Ty Simpson enough, which I don't think is a data point enough to do it, but that's what it took, he might be the starter as early as next year. I mean, Stafford's been seemingly 1 foot out the door into retirement over the last few years, even though he's coming off a great season. But they're thinking long-term and short-term all at the same time, and I think that's what a good franchise does. But, yeah, we'll see how it plays out. And, just for everybody on the channel here, we broke it down with Jordan Rodriguez. She had great insight based off, her history, covering the Rams and knowing Sean McVay and Les Snead, and tried to get into what they were thinking through this whole process. We had a great conversation with her on Saturday. It's in the video section on YouTube here.
To me, it's the closest analog to this is the Jordan Love draft pick for Green Bay a few years ago, where it's basically a direct choice between, do you draft the quarterback's long-term successor here, or do we give the quarterback another receiving weapon to try and win another championship with? That, I think, is the sort of debate that they were dealing with because, a lot of people had them drafting Mekhi Lemon or whoever it is, and you can definitely argue right now, if you're trying, like this is the best roster in the NFL, perhaps, if you were finding a weakness, you would say, who's the third receiver? And actually, it's a weakness that really showed up against the eventual Super Bowl champion Seahawks, where suddenly they're trying to throw passes to Mumford and trying to fit the ball in there. And you're like, I mean, if Mumford was Mekhi Lemon instead, would they have won that game, right? So you could directly say maybe the difference between this team winning, and remember, the other factor is the thought that whoever won the NFC Championship game would have won the Super Bowl, right? Whether it's the Rams or the Seahawks. So you can trace a fairly direct line between not having the player that you would pass up to make this draft pick and maybe winning another championship. But I think you can also make the argument that if there is power to the way Green Bay have done this, right, twice now with Aaron Rodgers and then with Jordan Love, if there is power to drafting a guy a year or two before you need him, sitting him, developing him from the sideline, and then having this smooth succession plan and having the next quarterback in place for the next 10, 15 years, that's worth the risk that the one player you've turned down to make this happen is the difference between winning a championship, another one, or not, right? And that obviously is the determination that they've made. It's that if Ty Simpson is the guy. If we then have an orderly line of succession between Matthew Stafford and Ty Simpson, this is worth whoever we've left on the table because you get your quarterback for the next 10, 15 years, and that is still the most important thing in the NFL. From Ty Simpson's point of view, I think it is the perfect landing spot for him to go to because I think he needs to sit and rework some things. I think his accuracy is iffy, but I do think he's fairly far ahead for a guy as inexperienced as he is in terms of reads, progressions, aggressiveness with the football is there. He's got that Matthew Stafford, willingness to attack the heart of a defense and go for the jugular with every throw. So there's some things in there I really like. The fact that he doesn't need to play and shouldn't be playing for the next year or two, I think is good for him. Obviously, you go to McVay, all that's good. It's basically, do you have a problem with them turning down Mekhi Lemon to draft the successor? And I don't really.
And going back to the Packers thing, you always make the point we don't get the counterfactual.
Right. We don't know if that's a good thing or not.
But I'm going to bring up the alternative maybe for the Packers. I'm guessing if you ask the Packers or you ask Packers fans, are you happy with the Jordan Love move a couple of years ago? They'd say yes.
Right.
I mean, well done. He got to sit for a few years. We moved on from Rodgers. We moved on at the right time where he was getting old and regressing. And wow, kudos to Matt LaFleur for developing Jordan Love that he could be a plug-and-play starter. And depending on what you feel about Love, he's anywhere from QB 6 to 12, or whatever it is, right? And the Packers have been a good team. So kudos to the Packers. The alternative is the very year that they drafted him, they lost by 5 in the NFC Championship. The following year, they lost in the divisional round, both times at home. And everybody expected Rodgers to get a receiver. Man, he really needs somebody to complement Devontae Adams. And the next receiver off the board was T. Higgins.
And the one right after that was Michael Pittman.
And Michael Pittman's right after. So we don't get that world. And if you asked the Packers, do you think, and I'm not a believer that one player puts you over the top. I don't believe that's a thing. But would T. Higgins have been the difference for the Packers in 2020 and 21? Would Michael Pittman Jr. been the difference? And if he was, if you snuck a Super Bowl out of that, would that be worth maybe being in QB purgatory for the next few years? Because then you ask the Steelers fans, if you knew that you could draft, say Jordan Love was in the 2018 draft, and you could have drafted Jordan Love and had him as the successor versus going through Mitch Trubisky and Russell Wilson and Kenny Pickett and Old Man Rodgers and the song and dance that the Steelers are going through. Would you choose that? Right? And again, we don't get the other side of it. But I don't think it's as simple as like, oh man, you're win now. Just go win now. We've seen the Packers probably feel pretty good about the Jordan Love thing. We've seen teams like the Steelers maybe not do this, and they're still sitting here figuring out their quarterback situation. Or the Colts are figuring out their quarterback situation for 6 and 7 years, and the Rams are trying to avoid that.
No, that's the fascinating thing, right? Because that Green Bay, that's why it's such a good case study to me, is that I think is exactly the scenario that the Rams are facing, right? That 2020 season, the year after they drafted Jordan Love, they made it as far as the NFC Championship game.
They lose by 5 in the NFC Championship to the Bucs.
Right.
Would T. Higgins have been the best, assuming they picked the best receiver there?
They lose by 5 to the Bucs with Devontae Adams getting 15 targets, and then the next guy on the depth chart is Marquez Valdes-Scantling, who actually had a big game that year. That game, 4 catches for 115 and a touchdown. But it was Devontae Adams getting by far the bulk of the work. Right. MVS with a couple of big shots in there. Alan Lazard. Like, if you put T. Higgins on that team, does that win them that game? Does that get them to a Super Bowl? Does that win them the Super Bowl? Or Michael Pittman wasn't as productive as a rookie, but T. Higgins or Michael Pittman, you put them on that team, do they win another championship? I don't know that you can answer no to that, right? It's at the minimum now, it's at least still an open question. So even now with hindsight, you don't know whether it was the right move or not, right? Point is, that's the decision the Rams were faced with, right? Do we draft Mekhi Lemon, thinking that might be the difference between beating the Seahawks in the NFC Championship game or not? Or do we draft Ty Simpson thinking that he's our Jordan Love, and in 2 years' time, we get to hand the baton over to him and we're set for the next 15 years, right? I don't know that there's a definitive right or wrong answer to that, and yet people will act like there is.
It's a fun discussion, man.
But by the way, we started this. Again, the most interesting thing about this to me is not even the Ty Simpson thing. It's about the FDM picks idea of, well, we do whatever we want with the top pick, but then we draft 12 times and that makes up for a lot. They went into this draft with 7 draft picks and only actually spent 5 of them on picks. So that's the biggest deviation to this, is that they didn't do the usual strategy of drafting volume.
So that's my bigger concern, man, is with the Rams over the last 2 years. Last year, they only drafted 6 times. So now the thing that made them so good, and I use this stat all the time, is that since 2017, they've added more value in the draft than any other team based off my production numbers. That's not adjusted for rounds. That's with only 1 first rounder. It's not even adding in the fact that they got all those veteran players for the first rounders. So the Rams have been, you could argue, the best roster construction team over the last decade, both from a draft and how they handle free agency when they do, with one Super Bowl win in the mix there during that time period. And they go in 2023, they drafted like 100 times, 2024 about 10 times, and now the last 2 years they've had 11 picks total. And one of them is on the future quarterback. 2 of them are on second-round tight ends, right? So you could say, okay, if we're looking into the future here, they're going to – all of the success they had drafting from 2023 and 24, they're going to be paying all those guys in the coming years. A lot of high-value positions there. They've got secondary players. They've got receivers. They've got defensive linemen. They have not replenished the high-value positions over the last 2 years. I think that's a bigger criticism of the Ty Simpson pick, is the fact that they haven't done the usual strategy of like, they're in this position because they hit on day 3 players. They hit on Puka. They hit on Kobe Turner. I think Josiah Stewart's going to be a player in the coming years. They hit on all these players historically through the years. Quentin Lake, Kyron Williams. I don't know that they've hit on those players over the last 2 years, and they haven't drafted in the volume. I think that's what has me more concerned for the Rams in, say, 2027 and 28 than anything else.
I would feel a lot better about this draft if they had, done the same thing at the top, drafted Ty Simpson, even used their second rounder on Max Clare again, and if instead of trading up for players in day 3, they had traded down and picked, 10, 11 times instead of 6, right? Or 5, rather. If they had traded backwards instead of up and tried to just throw some more darts. Now, people have said that NIL has basically ruined day 3 of the draft. It's just decimated the talent pool. And, maybe the Rams looked at this and their usual, the data that's been identifying Puka Nacua and all these other day 3 hits, it said nobody's there, right? This is just there's nobody. And they've gone the other way. And they've said, well, the only players that the data has identified as being in any way useful are C.J. Daniels and Tim Keenan, right? So we're going to go get those guys come what may.
And I like Daniels. I like him. My data love Trost, by the way, at 93 as one of the best, round 4 later players in the draft. And I like C.J. Daniels. So I like both of those players.
So maybe their data, of which they have as much as anybody, maybe it says there's just nobody on day 3 worth taking, so except these few guys. So go get these few guys, and it doesn't matter if we chew up some draft picks to make it happen, because we don't want any of the players we would be taken by those draft picks anyway. You and I think, would both say, generally speaking, I think it's worth having more picks just in case you're wrong, because you might stumble into somebody, as opposed to that you're so good at doing this, you can actually identify the few guys that are worth taking a shot on. But maybe, they've been one of the best drafting teams on day 3 for years. Maybe give them the benefit of the doubt and say that's what they've done. But that's the risk, right? Is that generally speaking, when you put that many eggs into 1 or 2 baskets, it's risky.
Yeah, I'm just saying, usually when you draft 11 times across 2 years, one of them's on a future quarterback, and the 2 highest picks are on tight ends.
Yeah.
That's what I'm concerned about maybe for the future. Now, the players themselves, I really liked Max Clare. Getting him at 61 I thought was good. I liked him as maybe tight end 3 in this class. I think he's athletic, smooth pass catcher. I think they added another impact tight end to the tight end room where they're going to be running, 14 personnel, of course. Keegan Trost, as I mentioned, probably a guard conversion. He's a little bit older, but productive player who I thought was a good player, good pick at 93. And C.J. Daniels, I've been covering, college football for a while now. He's always popped in my transfer portal model, the draft models and everything. So I like Daniels as a 6th round pick. I think he's got a chance at pick 197 to be, a potential steal here.
And then lastly, Jason, with a super chat, was asking, how much can someone improve by just starting 1 out of 6 or 7 years, though, college, and potentially 1 to 3 years behind Stafford?
We just don't really know. Yeah. I hate that my brain works like this, and I just want to say, well, you can't develop with no reps. And we just don't have enough examples. Like Geno Smith did. I mean, Geno Smith started for a couple years, was overwhelmed, was terrible, sat as a backup for 6, 7, 8 years. How many years was he a backup? And then all of a sudden, oh, by the way, Geno Smith's good. I mean, there are examples of just sitting and being good. But I think reps are great. But Ty Simpson being in the building with Stafford and McVay and everything, like, yeah, he could develop. That could work.
The problem is we have no idea what effect sitting is having, right? All we have is the data of a guy sat and then the results of that. But we don't actually know whether the sitting did anything. So the Geno Smith thing, you can argue, oh, Geno Smith sat for years and that developed him, and that's the difference between Jets Geno and then Geno being good, right? Or you could argue Geno just learned, right? Had nothing to do with sitting over just the amount of time he was in the NFL.
He just worked on the side. He got better mechanically.
Or just being in the NFL.
Dumpster fire. Like, there's a lot of variables there.
Or just being in the NFL for that amount of time and being in meeting rooms and blah, blah, blah. It didn't have anything to do with sitting. It was just being around the NFL for 8 years or whatever, right? If he'd been starting for 8 years and he'd gotten that kind of runway, you would have gotten good Geno Smith by the end of it. He was just never going to get given 8 years of starting, right? So we never know what effect the actual sitting has. The Jordan Love thing. He was seen as a project coming out. He put it all together. Maybe the sitting did it, or maybe, he would have put it together the same way Josh Allen did, right? Josh Allen took effectively 3 years to become a good player. Jordan Love did the same thing. It's just that for those years he was sitting his ass on the sideline. We don't know if the sitting did anything or if he just would have had a Josh Allen type career arc. It just happened. So that's the problem, is that it's all guesswork, right? I would imagine at this point the Green Bay Packers believe there is tremendous power to taking a guy 2 years early, sitting him for 2 years, developing him on the sideline, and then giving him the starting job. It's worked out for them 2 times in a row. Why wouldn't they think that's a good idea? Maybe the Rams believe that there's power to that, and they think that's the thing to do. But unfortunately, we have no idea because we never get the A/B analysis. You never get what would happen if this guy had gone the other way.
Anyway, I think it's a fun discussion. I think it's worthwhile. Anything else on the Rams? I liked some of their day 3 picks. We had to spend a lot of time on Simpson. Go listen to the interview with Jordan. I thought she had really good insight. I don't think McVay's body language. I don't think McVay's upset about the pick. I don't think there was bad body language. I do think he still wants to get at. Well, maybe there was, but he wants to get after it with Stafford, and I don't think he hates Ty Simpson or whatever the internet's saying.
I think, I don't think that Sean McVay didn't like this pick, didn't want this pick, wasn't on board, that Les went rogue. I think McVay was absolutely involved, if not driving this pick. I do think there was bad body language, but I think that's explained by Matthew Stafford's contract is not necessarily done right now. They don't want to piss off Stafford as they're dealing with a contract, plus trying to get him ready for one more go to Super Bowl, if not 2 more goes. And they, I think, erred trying to thread a needle between being happy you drafted Ty Simpson, but not wanting to upset your current quarterback. The composite grades for this largely hated the Rams, which I'm sure is to do with basically a referendum on Ty Simpson. A- from CBS Sports, B+ from Chad Reuter, who remember NFL. A couple of B- in there. An F from Sharp Football. A D+ from Roto World. Another few D+, Yahoo, and then D's all over the place. So generally the NFL or the grades hated this. The only team they hated more was the Jags.
I'll wrap up with this about the Rams. I know this isn't the best way to analyze it, but the fact that Les Snead's had previous success and this regime's had previous success, you just say, well, they're going to do all the right things.
Give them the benefit of the doubt.
But
why not?
I'm interested by it. Like, they have always done things differently. When everyone was saying you stack up picks early, they were trading them. And then they were stacking up third rounders. And they were always zigging when other people were zagging. Even from this tight end personnel thing. Oh, everybody's got to run 12 and 13 personnel. Well, McVay wasn't doing that 3 years ago. Now he is. And now everybody's following the Rams. They are trendsetters, not followers or copycats. I'm not saying that everything they're going to do is going to work. But they have been trendsetters, the Rams, the last couple of years.
Yeah, I mean,
last decade.
They've earned a degree of benefit of the doubt, right? There are other franchises out there where when they do something that's unconventional or seems against conventional wisdom, you would say, well, there's no reason you should trust yourself, right? You've demonstrated zero ability to game the system in any way, shape, or form. You're probably wrong, right? That's the analysis when it comes to some teams. The Rams, you would say, okay, in multiple different ways in the last decade, let's say, you have shown an ability to do better in certain ways than other teams. You have shown an ability to beat the system. So if they do what we've just said, they go the opposite of the FDM picks in a year where everybody says this draft isn't that great and maybe day 3 has been wrecked by NIL, they're in fact getting rid of picks and putting all their eggs in a couple of baskets. Most teams, you would say that's objectively dumb. With the Rams, you would say, given the history of these day 3 guys you've hit on, I can at least construct an argument that says maybe they do know better than other people. My default position would still be, I don't think you should do that. I think that's still not the smartest idea in the world. But with the Rams, I think it is fair to treat them a bit differently and say they've probably earned the benefit of the doubt to at least swing on that without you grading the draft an F because you're like, I wouldn't have done that.
Since 2018, because Nick Underhill says I need to brag about my system a little bit more, the only team that has outdrafted the Rams using my production value metric is me. With my method, using my player score, my draft score, and my second option. My second option has outdrafted every team in the NFL as well, using my method of drafting the top player on my board in the round in which they were drafted had they been available. So it's tough to criticize the Rams.
Put another way,
after
the Rams have been the best drafting team in
They've
the
also
NFL.
been the best drafting actual NFL team,
Right.
but I would have been the best
Which
drafting
again
team
is
had
a
someone
reason
used my method.
Is a reason that you might give them the benefit of the doubt for this, right?
Absolutely.
This has been literally the best drafting team in the NFL over a period of time. Generally speaking, that tends to come back down to earth and regress to the mean, but it's also a reason that you could give them the benefit of the doubt
Not
relative
if you
to
have
other
draft score.
teams.
Les, call me. Get your draft score. We'll get this thing back on track. You won't get any Fs in the media anymore. All right, you ready to move on? We got 2 more teams here.
Yep.
Before we got to get Lance in here for our secret interview.
You would get Fs all over the place, by the way.
Oh, I'd get Fs and then win games.
Right.
So that's fine. San Francisco 49ers are up next. Speaking of
Fs.
people aren't going to like it.
No, they're not.
People aren't going to like the draft. So they traded back a ton from round. They traded out of the back end of round 1. They had the first pick of round 2. They surprised everybody with Deshaun Stribling, the wide receiver out of Ole Miss, with pick 33 in the draft. They come back in round 3 with Romello Height at pick 70. Kalen Black, the running back out of Indiana, is pick 90 with their second third rounder. They got Grayson Holton, the defensive tackle out of Oklahoma. Carver Willis from Washington with their second fourth rounder. Your guy Ephesians Prysock, also from Washington, the cornerback at pick 139. Athletic linebacker Jaden Duggar at pick 154 in round 5, and then Enrique Cruz out of Kansas, offensive lineman, at pick 179. There was, I said healthy debate, I'd say unhealthy debate as well, around the consensus board this weekend, and the Niners were at the forefront of it because they probably had the most off-the-board draft of anyone. Let me preface this all at the top here. I'm not gonna say positively or negatively. I just can't wait. I just like watching these things play out. It's interesting.
Coward.
They picked a bunch of players I wouldn't have taken where they did, but I want to see how it all plays out. I'll give you some data behind the Niners as well as we go. But let's talk about the players. What were your initial thoughts here on the Niners?
If you factor in draft position, the 49ers reached collectively across their draft more than anybody else in the draft, right? So Stribling, for example, was a reach of around, right? Roughly a round, which is obviously smaller than the reach that some of these other day 3 guys had. But because it's earlier in the draft, right, the difference between the top of the third round, the top of the second round is huge, whereas the difference between the top of the 6th round, the top of the 5th round is much less. So if you're one of these people that says, anytime you deviate from the consensus board with a large reach, it's bad, and the stats do tend to back that up. Arif Hassan's data says that if you reach in a major way, the consensus board is basically right about the outcome of that player 80% of the time relative to the team that reached, right? So you should at a minimum be a little bit concerned if your team is reaching consistently relative to the big board. With Stribling in particular, though, so this is an interesting one where another one of these guys that was starting to get hype late in the process, right? Which can often be an indication that the NFL is higher on a given guy than draft nicks, than people in the public.
Could just be catching up to.
Well, it could be catching up, or it could be late in the process is when the information tends to get out, right? The real information, when suddenly more people in the building kind of understand what the team's plan is, what the final board looks like, and suddenly if you are somebody with connections, that's when you start hearing stuff, right? So I think the final week is when a lot of information starts to get out, and sometimes you're smoking, I buy all the smoke. Well, sometimes the smoke is actual fire, right? Sometimes the smoke is this information is starting to get out now because more people in the building know about it, and what seems like a random swell of hype for a given guy is actually what you're hearing is information is getting out from NFL sources that is real. Problem is, it's difficult to differentiate that from the actual smoke that's just nothing, right? Point being, Stribling was a guy where there was a lot of late buzz about him and people saying, man, this guy's going to go higher. I still think it's a reach, but I get it. You watch his tape, it's kind of exciting. I mean, he's 6'2", 200-plus pounds, like 205 at his pro day, 207 at the combine, ran a 4.36, which is pretty lightning, had good jumps, and there's some real suddenness to his tape as well. Like, he runs away from people. He can take those sort of short angles where he'll catch something short and then dive forward into the right gap, and he's difficult to bring down. Like, I get it. I think there's a lot of exciting stuff about his tape. One of the biggest problems is he's not young. He's a pretty old prospect. He's been in college for, 5 years? All 5 of them were at quirky offense teams, which just makes the projection tougher, right? So I kind of get why you would be enticed by him, but I also think there's enough to be scared about that I wouldn't have been in a desperate hurry to overdraft the guy by a round relative to the consensus board.
Yeah, and the Niners have done a pretty good job getting wide receiver value out of guys like Juwan Jennings. I still think Ricky Pearsall has something to offer there. They got Brandon Ayuk a couple years ago, so there's that. If we're going to give the benefit of the doubt, there's places to give the benefit of the doubt to the Niners. I'll give you an example later. When we wrap this up, I'll give you an example where not to give them the benefit of the doubt and why maybe the criticism is warranted as far as the reaches go. But yeah, I understand Stribling as a prospect. I just would have rather taken him later. He's got good size, good speed, the slot fade, weapon, down the field and ball skills. There's a lot to like.
I mean, I would have put him in a similar area in terms of rankings to Chris Brazel and Ted Hurst, who both went almost 2 rounds lower. Like, they went towards the bottom of the third, and he went at the top of the second.
Right. So that's part of the point here. Romello height, similar age question here. If you just watched the film last year with Texas Tech, man, he is tough to block. He's got that like Euro step type of deal going where he'll mess up the tackle's pass set because he gets on them quickly. He's just a little bit older. A little bit of a late breakout across multiple schools here, but he's got some juice off the edge. He's undersized from a just pure weight perspective, but I think he's got some of that. Can threaten the edge, can bend around the edge, but I think he brings a little bit of that pass rush juice that the Niners do need here.
Yeah. I think he was a solid enough player. Definitely made some plays for Texas Tech. The next pick, though, is an interesting one. Kalen Black, because it's the Shanahan third-round running back every time. I would look. Who's that guy that asks questions that the 49ers hate? Grant Cohen, is that his name?
It's the Niners have the most fascinating beat because they all hate each other and fight each other, and some of them challenge the Niners, and then other people are just like, everything the Niners do is the best.
Right.
So they're just all over the place from what I've seen on the Niners beat.
At the press conference, he asked John Lynch and Shanahan why they reach so much in the draft every year and sort of suggested that their hit rate wasn't great. And you could tell that John Lynch hated every fiber of him during that question and was answered it with the sort of standard, well, you see there was reaches. We think they're good players. Shut the hell up, right? And then Shanahan actually gave a pretty thoughtful and reasonable response to the whole thing and didn't seem to hate him with as much visceral, fire as John Lynch did. I need Grant Cohn to ask the 49ers people whether they've ever sat Shanahan down and shown him the track record of the random running back he drafts in the mid-rounds every year and been like, hey, I know we give you one of these every year, but have you noticed that all of them suck? Have you thought maybe let's not do that this year? Maybe leave the running back pick into somebody else, or maybe just take a back seat and we'll go find someone somewhere else, right? I actually kind of like Kalen Black, but the track record of the random running back Shanahan drafts in the third every year is terrible.
Do we have to go through it?
Hey, if you like.
Let's see what we got here.
Usually the guy that they find as an undrafted free agent later is
Jordan
better.
James in the 5th last year.
Right.
Isaac Guerrero in the 4th in 2024. You got Tyrion Davis Price.
Yep.
In 2022 in the 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Trey Sermon.
Yep.
Still believe. In 2021 in the 3rd. And before that, there was Joe Williams a few years back, I believe it was in the 3rd or 4th, and he was 4th round, super fast. I don't even think he played in the NFL at all.
Uh-huh.
So none of those guys did anything. And honestly, even some of the back, and then you get who was Elijah, what's his name? Elijah Mitchell. All of a sudden, you get this late rounder that kind of pops.
That's what I'm saying.
Jordan James could be the guy. But even when you bring in Brian Robinson as a 1-year backup, it is just a fascinating thing that Kyle Shanahan, who we all revere as the running back maker, the Shanahan family makes running backs. They've been doing it since the beginning of this century. They're the running back makers, and they always take a lot of shots on running. They don't make every running back, right? They take a lot of shots on running back.
By far, I think the most successful rusher that they have taken, despite all those running back picks, is Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel, I think, has been a better running back than any of the players that Kyle Shanahan has targeted as a running back in the draft. So my challenge to Grant is to ask him that question. Has anyone ever, have they self-scouted whatever process leads them to repeatedly drafting these running backs in the mid-rounds? Is it a Shanahan-driven decision? And if so, has anybody suggested that he might want to stop doing that?
All right, let's go through some of the other players here, and then I want to give you some of the data on the Niners.
But
drafts.
By the way, again, that's a comedy part of this whole process. But I actually quite like Kalen Black as a running back. He doesn't have. Yeah. He's which is the Katron Allen, the Penn State guy that doesn't have the athleticism but does have the good running back ability. I feel a bit like that with Kalen Black. He doesn't necessarily have the special physical traits, but he's a good runner.
Yeah, they had just can't remember the guy's name all of a sudden now because that's what happens. He outplayed their other transfer running back who came in with some hype last year and was just a good, dependable running back on their national title team. So
yeah.
Grayson Halton, I really liked that pick in round 4. I think he's got some pass rush chops as a interior as a defensive lineman, defensive tackle, 4.82, 1.7, 10-yard split, above average as far as pass rush win rate, pressure percentage, sack percentage. He's a good player. I think they've added. I'll say this, for a team that absolutely needs to get after the quarterback better, I think Halton has a chance to do that. Height, I think, has a chance to do that in round 3. I think they got better, at least on the defensive line, and that's multiple years of throwing a lot at defensive tackle and edge rusher for the Niners. Between Michael Williams last year, Alfred Collins, C.J. West, they have attacked that defensive line with a lot of bodies these last 2 years.
Yeah, agreed. And that one, I think, is a good value pick as well.
That was one of the... That was better.
As much as I kind of like Kalen Black as a player, that's another one that by the consensus board was a major reach for them.
He was probably in the 200s?
Yes, he went 90 overall, and he was 214 on the consensus board.
Jaden Duggar at linebacker, just wanted to highlight him really quick. He had impressive athleticism, and I can't pull it up right now at the moment. Talk about Ephesians while I pull up Duggar's numbers that are worth discussing.
I love Ephesians Pricesock. He was the first guy that jumped out to me at the Senior Bowl. He's a big, long corner. There's a lot of those guys around. His teammate is one of them, and sometimes you see those guys and they really struggle with change of direction or quickness or anybody that can kind of get them high and out of whack physically. But he can move well. He didn't seem to struggle with that change of direction or quickness and stuff. I thought he played really well or looked really good at the Senior Bowl, played really well in the drills. I'm kind of excited by what he could be at the NFL level now. He's a 4th-round pick, so he's not going to get the most opportunity in the world, but he could be something for them.
And then Duggar, just to wrap with him, 35-inch arms at linebacker, 84 and 3/8-inch wingspan. Wingspan of what, 7 foot plus?
7'2".
7'2". 100th percentile among linebackers, ran a 4.6, 1.61 split, all really good athleticism numbers. I've got him with a draft score 14 of production. 14 is his production.
7 flat, right? 84.
Yeah, 7. 14 is his production score. 89 is his combine score. So just an interesting late round athletic linebacker, and they used a 5th rounder or they got a 5th rounder back for D. Winters, lose a starting linebacker there. Maybe Duggar ends up being their developmental linebacker, special teamer there. Let me just wrap with this. The Niners, there's 2 ways of looking at this. They've won a lot of football games. They've done a really nice job in the John Lynch, Kyle Shanahan era. I'm just going to give you the stat. Since 2021, since 2022, using my production value metric, one of the worst drafting teams in the NFL. So since 2022, they're 3rd worst, ahead of just the Panthers and Vikings. The production value that they've brought to the team, Dominic Pooney is the only above-average player so far. We'll see what happens with Mykel Williams, injuries. We'll see what happens with Ricky Pearsall, injuries. So far, that's it. If you go to the first 4 rounds, they're worst since 2021. I'm just telling you what the data says right now. Now, it doesn't mean they haven't won a lot of games, but I think there's some residual because if you did the previous 4 or 5 years, the George Kittles and Deebo Samuels and Brandon Ayuks of the world, they look great. And then the force multiplier on this is when you hit on Mr. Irrelevant Brock Purdy and he's as good as he is and Kyle Shanahan is as good as he is, it offsets a lot of those warts. So my concern for the Niners, and I know they were great last year, despite not being great on paper. They almost were the number 1 seed. I do think their roster has taken a big hit these last couple of years. And as Trent Williams gets older and George Kittle gets older and more players are going out the door, it's going to be harder to maintain that success unless Kyle Shanahan is just forever a magician. Yeah. That's my point, as I think the players have gotten worse. The coaching is still excellent, and Brock Purdy has been excellent, and that has offset a lot of what the Niners have done. And I know we used to talk about Purdy getting carried by everybody, and it's like, well, there's some evidence going the other way that this roster is getting worse, and Purdy is doing a really nice job with what they've been given.
And it's getting worse because of drafting. Like, this is the thing, right? You can look at the drafting history of the Rams and say, over a significant period of time, this is literally the best drafting team in the NFL, so they've earned some benefit of the doubt. There were people out there when this consensus board argument was taking place on Twitter that were like, oh, the 3 teams that you're talking about reaches, those are all playoff teams. Therefore, shut the hell up. You're like, yeah, but the 49ers have been objectively terrible at drafting the last few years. Brock Purdy saves them from having maybe the worst 3-year drafting stretch in NFL history, right? And that's not even factoring in the additional cost when it was to go up and get Trey Lance, who was supposed to be the quarterback of the future, a complete and total whiff, and then they're saved by finding Brock Purdy with a 7th-round pick. And when he's a 7th-round pick, you don't even get credit for that necessarily, right? Because it's not like your board identified this guy, as a sleeper relative to everybody else, and you stole him and you fixed it. Like, you stumbled into Brock Purdy, right? Let's be honest. Now, kudos, you got him and he's fixed everything, but you stumbled ass backwards into him, and that saves you from having a 3-year stretch of drafting in which you basically got no good players, right? So you can't look at that and say, well, this team therefore should be reaching every time they want. Right? Of course they've earned the benefit of that. It's like, no, it's a good roster, and it's getting worse, and it has Kyle Shanahan attached to it. That's why they're winning games, not because they've been drafting better than everybody else, and therefore they can reach whenever they want.
All right, man, give the grades really quick. We got to wrap it up with the Seahawks here. There was a question from Thomas, why does the South always last every year? Unfortunately, there's fewer fans in the South, and we just do it by the level of fandom that we get from North, East, West, and then South teams. So my apologies.
The composite grades hated this. It was 30th. It was 1 spot above the Rams, 2 spots above the Jags. Chad Reuter from the NFL gave them an A-. That was the only grade above a B+, where Sharp Football gave them. There was a D-. There was an F from Roto World and another D- from Marcus Bloomberg, the sport.de guy.
Mohall wants a bonus live show on what? The entire Niners breakdown? Perhaps?
What?
Mohall said bonus live show.
On what?
As a super chat.
A live show of what?
I don't know. Let us know. All right, let's go Seattle Seahawks here to wrap it up. They go at pick 32, the Super Bowl champs, Jadarian Price, the running back out of Notre Dame. They come back with Bud Clark, safety out of TCU at the end of the 2nd round. 3rd round at pick 99, it's Julian Neal, the cornerback out of Arkansas. Bo Stevens, the guard out of Iowa in round 5. Emmanuel Henderson, the wide receiver out of Kansas in round 6. And then 3 7th-rounders, Andre Fuller, cornerback Toledo. Devin Eastern, defensive tackle out of Minnesota. And Michael Dansby, the cornerback out of Arizona. Arizona with a lot of secondary players drafted here. So, your thoughts on the Seattle draft? Remember, they came in with, 5 picks? 4 picks.
Yeah.
End up with 8.
So that's what I was going to say. That's
most of them were around 5
thing.
or later, but they did add some volume to the mix here.
Yeah, so this is actually a really interesting draft in terms of that process. This was a team that came in with 4 picks, and had at least one glaring need on the roster, right, running back, because you let Ken Walker walk in the offseason. I've done that twice today. You let Ken Walker walk. Like I doubled up with the guy's name and the word I wanted to use. So they let Ken Walker leave in free agency, and then their other running back is coming off a major knee injury, so like you might not have a significant running back on the roster heading into the season unless you did something in the draft. They also let it be known, we only have 4 draft picks this year. We would desperately love to get out of the first round, trade back, and pick up extra draft picks. Evidently, nobody was biting, or the teams that were biting jumped higher than they were.
Every team ahead of them had traded down already in the first round.
So it seemed like, from the outside looking in, they just couldn't get out of that pick. And so they were left with the choice, do we draft best player available, or do we draft the need that we have, right? And they elected to take the need. Jadarian Price, the other Notre Dame running back, sneaks into the first. That must have been a reasonable reach, but not a major one, right? He was being talked about as someone that could. I just didn't think it would happen. He was 53 on the consensus board. So a bit of a reach, but not like catastrophic. Anyway, they end up taking him, I think, effectively because they were stuck in that draft spot and had this glaring need. They did like the opposite of what the Chargers did, right? They did address their need because they had to. I think if they had the opportunity to do whatever they would have wanted to, they would have traded down 15, 20 spots and then drafted Jadarian Price, but they didn't have that opportunity. So they draft Price, they use their second-round pick on Bud Clark, and then they start trading back and accumulating more draft picks. So in terms of process, I think this is a really interesting draft because presumably they tried to do something different up top, and this is the thing, right? Sometimes you grade drafts, you're like, well, why didn't you do that? I mean, this is as clear as evidence as you're ever going to get. They desperately tried, and just nothing was good doing, right?
They had to stick and pick with their first 2
So then
picks.
you've got to do something. You've got to do the lesser of 2 evils, and they decided the lesser of 2 evils was drafting the running back. Then they obviously liked Bud Clark enough to take him in the second-round period, and then they do the thing that everybody would have wanted them to do, which is start trading back, accumulating more picks, and just make more picks. So that part I really like, and I don't think you can hate them too much for effectively being stuck where they were and addressing their biggest need.
I mean, Price immediately becomes one of the most important picks of the draft just because of Walker walking and Zach Charbonnet being injured, and Price for a guy that I think you look at this both ways. Less wear and tear on him in college. I think the most impressive thing is the fact that Jeremiah Love did not become a 25 carry guy at Notre Dame, and that Price was good enough to steal some carries. I thought he was, averaging 4.2 after contact per attempt in his entire career, 94th percentile when it comes to that. I think he's got this short area burst, gets to the second level extremely well. He's got some wild contact balance plays, Stanford at the goal line where he still made it into the end zone. So there's a lot to like about Price, some questions about him, either pass pro or catching the ball out of the backfield just because you didn't get to see it a whole lot. But I think he's similar to Walker in that respect, in that he's probably a better runner than what you think he's going to do in the pass game, but it's really tough to really project that necessarily. But I think he's good up to 15 yards, and he's got a little bit of big playability in there as well.
Yeah, I think he's a really good player. He's absolutely shredded. Like, he's 5'11"-ish, rounding up to 5'11", over 200 pounds. Like, he's absolutely jacked. The muscle of the guy is nuts. He's, I think, a really good running back. The question is going to be, how much does he add in the pass game? I think that is a bit of a question just because he didn't get that opportunity. But the fact that he was even able to take Jeremiah Love off the field at any point is impressive by itself, right? I mean, that's why he went – forget going in the first round. That's why he was the second running back off the board, even though Jeremiah Love was by far, the best player in this draft or the best running back in this draft. So, again, given that they, I'm sure, would have liked to trade back 15 spots and just didn't get the offer, I'm okay with this.
All right, and rave about Bud Clark, who you love in round 2 here.
Dude's a ball hawk. He's just a playmaker in coverage. Now, it comes at a cost. I don't think he's very good against the run / tackling, but that dude in coverage is as good as any safety in this draft class. Like whether it's as a deep sideline to sideline free safety, whether it's matched up, in the red zone against players one-on-one, I think that dude can absolutely cover and not just make passes difficult to complete, but make plays on the ball while it's in the air as well. Like that guy made plays left, right, and center all the way through the Senior Bowl. And I think he's a real potential difference maker in that secondary. Like he'll create turnovers.
He's aggressive, flies around the field. Every angle's aggressive. It's like the shortest path to the ball. Sometimes he gets it, sometimes he doesn't, but he is aggressive. Bud Clark. They added some size to the secondary too. Julian Neal and Andre Fuller, both 6'1 plus. Neal in particular, 33 plus inch arms with Tariq Woolen leaving and the rest of the cornerback group being, not necessarily. I mean, there's nobody like Reek from a size perspective. Neal has some of that. Pretty good athlete. He's got some really impressive plays on tape as far as breaking passes up and being a nuisance at the catch point. So I think Neal was a really interesting player for them to get in the third round. Had some ups and downs overall at corner, so that's why he's available in the third round. But I thought what he brings to the table from a size perspective, Fuller had a really good production profile and good size on day 3. So I thought those were nice additions there by the Seahawks as well. And then I don't have strong opinions. Bo Stevens, the last thing I'll add, he had one of the more interesting. Do you remember the two players that it was against? The player that it was against, that story? So he's the guard from Iowa. He goes in the 5th round. He was playing a little center as well at the Senior Bowl. His teammates, Logan Jones. But Bo got wrecked.
I don't remember who we did it to.
Was it Darrell Jackson?
I don't remember.
I can't remember who it was. Somebody absolutely wrecked him on a center rep at the Senior Bowl. And usually you go to the end of the line and you just that's it. And he grabs the football and he goes, no, do it again. Line it up again. And center rep again, and he was ready. And whoever it was, he took him and just trapped him to the ground. It was amazing. It was just fun. I mean, you got wrecked on the first rep. You got him on the second rep. You don't always let the guy come back and get revenge, but he got his revenge and he fixed it. So Stevens was playing mostly, he's going to be a guard, but he trying to show some center versatility as well. And I think that's the type of dude you want as a backup offensive lineman on your team. So where did Seattle's draft rank here?
The Seattle composite was 23rd overall, so in that Steelers, Chargers, Packers kind of range. Bunch of Bs, few Cs, and 1 A minus from Nate Davis of USA Today.
I thought it was good. Again, I bet if you asked John Schneider, hey, would you rather have picked at 32 and
nobody hated
64?
Yeah.
Would you have rather move back 10 spots, probably still get your player at even more valuable picks? I'm sure he would have said yes. But the fact that they got some sort of day 3 volume, I think was a win. Price will be plug and play at running back. And the 3 players they added to the secondary, Bud Clark, Julian Neal, Andre Fuller, you add the Mike McDonald component to those players being added. I'm real interested in that for Seattle. The one place, I would have loved to see more D-line depth for them just to keep that strong going forward, but can't have everything in every draft.
Indeed.
There we go. Did we touch on Seattle enough? What are you talking to? Who are you talking to in the chat here?
The consensus argument is rearing its head again.
We're not getting into it. I'm not getting into it.
We can go bring it up with Lance.
Gauge of the market. Just a gauge of the market.
I think
even if it's wrong.
My big thing is everyone I think there's too much focus on who are the consensus anyway, right? It doesn't matter.
If I told you that my little sister who knows nothing about football.
Your youngest child. Yes. If the consensus came from your youngest child.
If Toby was the best mock drafter in 6 straight years
if we had a statistical history of evidence that says going against Toby's big board, right, has been a mistake 80% of the time, then it doesn't matter where the big board, it doesn't matter that it's a child coming up with it. The point is there's statistical evidence that says going away from it is bad.
And then figure out how to use it.
Yes.
Right? And that was part, there's 2 debates here really quick. I'm going to touch on them quickly. The people who are like, hey, I'm a scout. I do my own process. Great. I don't think scouts should use the consensus board.
Right.
I don't even think they should look at it. I don't think scouts should look at PFF grades.
Right. Again,
I don't even think the scouts should use stats.
The point is
I don't think they should tell you the pass rush win rate. I would let someone else in the building do that. You give me your scouting eye.
Right.
And then you become a data point in the whole thing for the decision maker, the general manager. Second thing, really quick. I'm not done. people push back when something's not perfect, right? We're in this black and white world where the consensus board isn't perfect. No kidding. If it's not perfect, it must not be used. There's a difference between it being perfect and useful. But again, and if something's been proved to be useful, it's on you to use it.
The takeaway is not, therefore, just draft from Toby's board, right? If that was the case, right? If Toby had created a board and for many years now there was evidence that deviating hard from Toby's board is a bad thing 80% of the time. The takeaway isn't to then just draft from Toby's board. The takeaway is if you want to draft a guy and you then reference it against Toby's board and it turns out you're going to overdraft this guy by 150 picks relative to his board and history says that's bad, then maybe check yourself, right? The takeaway is not to then just take the other board and use that to draft. Nobody I've seen that's got any kind of sense is advocating that, and yet that's the straw man that people are using to argue, consensus is bad.
And look, I've said this before too. We all got trained by watching the NFL draft and hearing Mel, and all of his analysis was in reference to his board, which is fine. This isn't even a criticism because I don't criticize anybody, right?
It is criticism, and it should be.
But that's how we were trained.
His way of doing it is bad. It's dumb.
And so what this is, and we did this when we were at PFF, and we're like, all right, well, we're going to create a better board, and we're going to reference every pick relative to our board. And this is how almost every draft analyst approaches this. Here's my opinion, and I'm going to analyze based off what my opinion is. And I didn't get the consensus board when I first saw it years ago. I didn't get why would I care about the consensus? I care about my board because this is how we were trained. And all you're realizing is, okay, the wisdom of the crowds piece, if there's signal in it.
Yes.
And there is. If there's not signal in it, then who cares?
Right.
But if there's signal in it, then it's at least worth
That's what they're missing.
All we've done is change from Mel saying my board and Mayock saying my board and us saying PFF board, our board, to here's what the consensus says. That's all we've changed to.
That's what they're missing, right? Like that's the point. Is all these crusty old draftniks or NFL people or anyone that works in a building, they're like, why would I care about this thing that's created by a bunch of people that have less information than we have, right? All of that is true. The reason you care about it is because it has been shown to have signal, right? That's the only reason it's relevant. Of course, the consensus of media people from the outside who have less information than NFL teams, both in terms of what a specific team is running internally, right? Scheme, what things we value more because of what we run, and also because you have less information, medicals, background checks, blah, blah, blah. Of course, it's less good. Each individual aspect of it is less good. The only reason you care about it is because it has been shown to have signal. That's why you care.
Can't convince everybody. We're not saying blindly look at it, but you compare your evaluations, your board, where you are. Because even within a building, there's like 30 evaluations on a player. They're going to disagree.
Yes.
You have to come to some sort of
consensus, ironically.
Consensus, right? And then you figure out how to weigh that against the market and say, hey, we think this guy's a second rounder, but what if he could be around in the third round? There's a whole different, we got to leave now, but there's a whole different discussion about, I think it's fair, like Bucky Brooks' point. You don't know what the team's trying to do and their culture and this and that. And the other point that I would make, when people say, well, the consensus board, they don't have the information, they don't have the medical, they don't have the character. That's actually a point in favor of the consensus board. The fact that it's that good without that information is actually a win. Because therefore, if you have that information, surely you could do better. I'll do my best to talk to Pete. We'll get Pete on the show and talk about it.
Dude, Frisco on the consensus board would be good content. We could, if we make that happen,
we just sit there and just get him as angry as possible.
Yeah.
Like, Pete, I could draft better just doing this. I'll just take the top player off the board and do it blind.
Just wind him up.
But the argument I would make against, not even against Bucky, but the point I would make, say against Bucky, saying, well, you don't know the scheme and this and that. I don't know if it's best practices for a team to say, this season we need 4 tight ends so we can run 12 personnel. I don't know if that's good practice. I don't know if the draft is the place to say, we're overhauling our scheme with one of our 7 picks. We have to get 2 tight ends. We have to get this type of pass rusher. We have to get this type of corner because of this scheme change that is inevitable. I think that's the wrong place to do it. Now, look, I've never sat in the seat. I've never had to convince the coaches that this is a bad idea. Hey, I know you want to run 12 personnel and we only have 2 tight ends that you trust and we need to get 2 more. But the draft is the place to get the best possible football players at the cheapest price, not the place to overhaul a scheme. So I would push back on that as an overall strategy, that your scheme and your system is so important that you would deviate from the value board just to fit it. That would be my argument against it.
It's not even that. It's that it doesn't explain the extreme deviations, which is the only place that the consensus board has this signal and this power. Like that's the reason that this is important. It's not like I have no problem. We've said all the time, right? Cornerback boards are going to look completely different depending on what type of scheme you run, right? Like some teams are going to want a Mansour Delane, some teams are going to want an Ephesians Pricesock in terms of body style because of what they run, right? But that doesn't explain drafting Ephesians Pricesock in the first round at 6 overall, right? Like, that's what the consensus board is supposed to highlight. It's like, yeah, of course, you will rank Ephesians Pricesock higher because of his size, or Takario Davis or whatever. Like, you're going to rank a guy like that higher relative to some other teams because of the specific scheme that you run, but not to the degree where you're going to draft him at 6 overall. And if that's what your board is spitting out, that's what the consensus board is supposed to highlight and say, hey, this says no, right? This says you're doing something crazy here. And even if your scheme says, he should be way higher, not to that degree. That's the point in all this. Is like, yeah, individual teams, there's a bunch of different ways where it should alter your board and make you go in a variety of different things. But there's a limit to that. And the point of the consensus board is the signal is when you deviate huge, that's when you screw up, right?
Right. It's not like 10 picks in the third or anything.
It's like you might rank a guy, 20 spots higher than somebody, or even a whole round later on day 3. But when you're saying that guy is a second round player based off your individual, idiosyncrasies as an organization, that's when you screw up, because the consensus board says that's nuts, right? That's the point in all this, is that it's completely irrelevant, effectively, where that information comes from. The point is, it's extremely good at identifying when teams go off the reservation and do something crazy, right? And you could say, well, they have better information than us, therefore, benefit of the doubt, be crazy all you like, right? But the data says that when they do that, they're wrong 80% of the time. That's why it's important.
All right, we got to wrap it up. We've got tomorrow's show. We're going to wrap it up with the Souths. We're 3/4 of the way through the league. Appreciate everybody for being here, for tuning in. Check out the North. Check out the East. Today was the West. Tomorrow is the South. We'll be back again tomorrow, 9 a.m. More. Check the mic.